Hey, hello, what's up, and welcome into episode 46 of the Geek Garage Podcast. I am Ted, joined as always by show founder David. Hello, David.
Hello, Ted.
You could have just said hi like a regular person. We are joined this week.
But bold of you to assume that I'm a regular person.
David, don't ever interrupt me again. We are joined this week by two very knowledgeable people, and dare I say, people we know. Mack and Tiffany Elder, both big Star Trek fans, here to talk about something else, not Star Trek, but... oh no, that is the show this week, isn't it?
I believe so,
unless
I'm gravely... What did you say? Let's talk about Rush?
I thought we were here for Rush.
I'm actually...
I mean...
If you're talking about the band, the movie, the other movie called... I'm in.
Yeah.
Totally
both
in all of them.
Both the drug movie and the race movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Two race movies, actually.
Two race movies.
But yes.
But no, Ted is correct. Today we are talking about Star Trek, and I know it's been a long time coming. Please don't come for my nerd card. I apologize that it's taken us 3 years to get to the Star Trek episode, but I wanted to do it right. So, obviously I wanted to find the right host or guest to come on and
No,
help me
David, they
out
have to deal with the host we have. You have to find the right guest.
You go to war with the host you have.
Yes.
Is that how the saying goes?
It's pretty close.
Okay.
That's how it goes now.
Right on. So, like Ted said, we have two very knowledgeable people in the topic of Star Trek. We welcome back Mack. Holy fuck, Mack
Elder Mack.
Mack Elder.
Just talking about the Mormons.
Mack Elder.
That's me.
Elder.
Who, if you listen to the hashtag Road to MTAC series last year that we did,
on anime.
2019,
He was one of the guests on
yes,
that.
he came on for the anime episode.
He was
and
the one
he
that
is
sounded
back,
like a knowledgeable regular person.
which is a breath of fresh air from the unknowledgeable, stupid person, which is me, who hosts the podcast. And that's precisely
Your
why.
words,
Yeah,
although not incorrect.
yeah, that's precisely why I have knowledgeable people on the podcast, is to kind of make the show look good. But that's another story. And Tiffany is here with us.
Also,
Hi.
yes.
Yes. Also Tiffany,
I'm
who is
also here.
also super
This is
knowledgeable.
my podcast place.
This
not bad.
is
It's pretty
this is
good,
actually her first time on the show.
Yes.
And we're excited to have her. But this, speaking of like podcasts in general and being guests, this is not the first podcast you've been on this week.
It is not.
About Star Trek. Even?
Yes, this is the second show I've been on about Star Trek. I actually just did an episode of Star Trek Tribunal, which is hosted here in Nashville by local nerd Sean Andrews, really great guy and very knowledgeable Trek fan. We did a show on an episode from the second season of Next Generation called Shades of Grey, which is the only full clip show in the show's history. So we basically took the time to say, well, only the first 10 minutes matter, and then it's just clips we've already seen. So then we talked mostly about favorite episodes, most overrated parts of Trek, and then we got sort of sidetracked. We talked about how to fix the Star Wars sequel trilogy. We talked about Babylon 5 for a little bit. We ended up then going back around to talk about whether you can say that your favorite movie is Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings. You can't. You have to pick a movie. It's like you have to pick an episode in the two-parters when you're saying your favorite episodes. We went all over the place, but it was great to sort of talk very, very minutia Trek for a little bit, and now I'm really excited to talk the whole thing.
Like macro.
Yeah,
Right.
macro
Right on.
Trek.
Right
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get the important topic out of the way immediately. Let's just dive right in. Which is your favorite series, and why is it the Next Generation?
It's funny how the Next Generation is an incredibly important piece of fiction for me. It was how
That's all I need to hear. Let's get on.
I will never stop watching Next Gen episodes. I've watched about a dozen this week, even in preparation for this. I love Deep Space Nine so much that it goes slightly beyond where my love for Next Generation goes. But
Terrible answer. But
It's also my opinion also. So.
wow. So get out, both of you. I would like to retract everything I said about them being knowledgeable. I'm sorry, listeners. I don't know what to do. I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, sorry, Ted can't control his like truth meter where like he just
We can-
I mean,
he
I
just
can
speaks.
show my work.
and whatever, we can talk Next Gen for the next 5 hours. I will totally do
Good,
that.
because that's what we're gonna do. No. I asked that because that's something Star Trek people do, right?
Yeah.
They always ask that.
What's your favorite series? Is the first question every time.
Right, and really the corollary of that is, who's your favorite captain?
Yeah.
I did get into a bar fight over this once with a guy.
Like an
because
actual-
I insisted that Cisco
So
Was the best captain.
So is the question, what is your favorite series because they get a good handle on your personality and who you are as a person?
Yes.
By who?
In some ways.
In some ways, yeah.
Okay.
I feel like Deep Space Nine just really... It dives deeper than any of the other Star Trek series for me. Like, we learn about...
I'm going to need
we
you
don't
to
just
get closer to
meet-
your microphone.
We don't just meet more alien races. We also, like, get to deeply know their species and, like, who they
Right.
are and why
Okay,
they
I
do
can
what they
dig
do.
that.
Yeah,
I'll dig
that's
that.
definitely
And
going
you
to be
do
the
get your
next
callback
series.
characters from the next generation, so you still get to hang out with your faves, you know. Worf
Right.
is
And
there,
problematic
and-
faves.
Yeah,
Well,
you're very problematic
fair.
face in almost every respect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fair, totally fair.
These people are like, I love that they pitch the idea of like this perfect humanity of the 24th century, and then you see these people and are like, oh my
They're
god,
all,
you're
like,
the
walking
worst.
disasters.
Yeah.
You're terrible, all of you.
Yeah. I'm kind of glad you brought up the aspects you did of like you get to it's a bit of a deeper
Yeah.
dive. So one of the things about Star Trek that I've always liked and sort of cringed at, as we just completely blow up the notes that we made for
Oh
this,
yeah, that's how it happens.
everybody's always been like it's got the satirical elements, or like it kind of looks at culture in a way, and I'm like, yeah, but the way they did that was sort of like ham-fisted. Like they literally had a person who was half black and half white. Like
Let
Right,
this be your
totally.
last battlefield from the original series.
Right.
Yeah, they literally put Riddler from the Batman TV series. It's like, I am half black and half white. He is half white and half black.
Yeah.
Oh no, our planet blew up.
So
We're the last two
literal.
left, so we're gonna stab each other.
right.
Allegory for the Vietnam War.
Right.
Credits.
Right. Which is just like, that's a way to approach it, certainly.
But that's the third season of the original series, and we can get
Yeah.
into that a little bit later. The
Yeah.
the sudden budget crunch that
I
caused
do-
them to do stuff like that.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I had to test your bona fides, as they say.
I do hold 2 world records in the field of Star
true.
Trek.
I
I
would've
married
admitted
this
that.
man for a reason.
It got me on ESPN's Not Top 10, and it got me 2 marriage proposals on IO9. So I feel like this was
had to
a
lock that down.
weird week in my life.
Totally.
I know
definitely-
some of those words.
ESPN is a sports network.
Oh my god. Fuck you, Terry.
I don't know what IO9 is, but
Yeah,
I'm
don't-
sure it's something like that.
Right.
It's Kotaku for
Matt,
sci-fi.
no one cares.
No, I know. No, trust me, that's pretty much how I live my life.
Oh.
Girl, same. All right, David, you can take back over now and do whatever you were going to do. That I don't know. I lost track.
Sure. So let's just fucking dive right into it. We got our first bullet point, which is how to be a fan of Star Trek.
There is no correct way, and I'm probably going to get really. I belong to a group on Facebook called Star Trek Shitposting, which is
Okay.
literally just like, it's bad jokes, and people. It's like 3 comments going like, "That's really funny," and then 12 comments going, "Well,
Actually,
yeah, it's
No.
actually it's incredible how quickly Star Trek fans can go from "that's fun" to "I hate this" to "I personally am going to drive to your house and shoot off your nuts." And you
Yeah.
can see the degrading comment to comment.
All the bad like nerd stereotypes that you see about how like they're insular and this and that, like they started here.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they started here because I think Star Trek was the first time there ever was a fandom that could meet like this. Like there were conventions in America before Star Trek. Worldcon has been going since the 1930s, but Star Trek was the first time there was the money and location and stars where they could all get together. And here is the first real convention in 1972-73 when it went into syndication. After being on NBC for 3 seasons, and then suddenly the popularity of this exploded. There were 1 billion people worldwide watching this show at the same time, and the actors, who were mostly out of work at that point, could basically say like, "Oh, you mean people will hand me $20 to like look at me in person?"
This is like 1972, $20.
Yeah.
Right,
That's something to write home
That's-
about.
Which is
that's a lot of money.
100 American dollars
Yeah.
now.
Is that the conversion rate?
That's
I mean,
about-
Yes.
it
Yeah,
it
it's about
sounds
5 or
right.
6
He
times.
knows, I
Yeah.
trust him.
Yeah.
As the person with the economics degree, that's not bad.
Yeah, I go like 5 to 6 when you go from the 1970s. Yeah.
So I just want to clarify. So when you say convention, you mean in the modern sense of like a Comic-Con?
Yeah,
sort of.
like
Right.
I think the Star Trek conventions heralded, sort of shepherded in the modern sense, the comic conventions we know.
Right.
People dress
now.
up
Yeah.
as the characters
Yeah.
and like
Go to meet their
Right.
favorite stars.
Especially
and all
because
that.
the Star Trek uniform is incredibly easy to replicate as a cosplay.
Sure.
It is a blue shirt, it is black pants and jack boots. End of list. And so you dress up like that, and people go, "Oh, you're Dr. McCoy," and you go, "Oh, you're Dr. Helen Noel from the episode Dagger of the Mind, season 1, episode 18." And
That is incredibly
totally
specific.
am. Yeah, and that's how specific it gets. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I have done single episode cosplays before.
Yeah, that is the impression that I've gotten so far as like diving into the series and then diving into the fandom of Star Trek is that that's their bread and butter, is getting uber specific about everything. Like,
well, I mean, we've talked about this, you and I don't know if on the show or not, but I know we've talked about it just in conversation. Like, as more content is created, people ironically become more attached to like one specific thing,
Right,
or
the
like
smaller
one specific
details.
genre, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, like we talked about this at GalaxyCon, where it's like we saw a lot of people that were cosplaying as something from like My Hero Academia, for example, right? Star Trek is a lot like that, where it's like not only do people have, oh, this is my favorite series or this is my favorite captain, they have like, oh, I'm going to cosplay as this side character from, like you said, like season 3, episode 4.
Sure.
And it sort of doubles as a way to, it's almost like signaling,
Sure.
in a way, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm a real fan in a way.
And then you want to see like who knows
and
who
it's
you
all
are.
exactly,
Yeah.
and then you can also test other people's like quote unquote nerd cred.
right, yeah, and that kind of ties into cosplay culture as well. You know.
Well, yeah, I have a specific one that one person has ever called out, where I do Dr. McCoy, but the colors are slightly wrong between the cuffs and the whole rest of it, which is the animated series was constantly miscolored, so he is always wearing a slightly wrong version of black,
All
which I
right.
have matched in this, and that's the moment of just like,
Yeah.
whatever, let's see what happens.
I just realized I've actually done 2 cosplays that were single episode
Yeah.
cosplays, where I did Jadzia Dex in the Trouble with Tribbles episode, and then I did Data as Sherlock Holmes on the holodeck, which I won a Sherlock Holmes costume contest while dressed as, even though nobody really understood who I was until I explained
That's
it.
a really good single episode poll, though.
Yeah,
It
that's
was a great
Yeah.
costume.
That's, I think, when people malign the first 2 seasons of TNG, I point to episodes like that, or To Measure of a Man, or like, they did some really interesting stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
I think that there's no way to write off the spandex seasons as completely lost, but we'll probably get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
when we-
Yeah, and just to speak to like Mac and Tiffany's like street cred regarding Star Trek, when I first brought this idea to them, I didn't hear back for like a day, and then all of a sudden I get the longest fucking text message I have ever seen, and I could tell like it was put together by both Mac and Tiffany, and it was like broken down in the most detailed way possible how to approach the show, like which episodes to watch from which seasons, in what order, and if I didn't want to stick to that order, an alternative order to how to approach it. And I was like, well,
Look.
if these aren't the right motherfuckers to bring on this podcast,
When you get down into
episode-
it, between the series, all the series and the movies now, there are just about 800 pieces of media, even when you don't go into the audio plays, the novels, the games, the video games. It's an overwhelming amount of Trek, and you can pick your favorites and you can follow your favorite characters, and I
Right.
think that's
There's
super
something for
exciting.
everyone.
Yeah, there's something for every sort of nerd in Star Trek when you boil down
Yeah.
to it.
I
There's,
agree.
You know, if you're into more psychological debates, there's Next Generation. If you're into the operatics of a great space battle, there's DS9. If you're a psychopath, there's Enterprise.
And like action, there's
you
the,
hate
the
yourself.
J.J. Abrams
Right.
movies.
So how
If
do
you hate yourself, there's the J.J. Abrams movies.
We'll get there. I have a lot of thoughts on those.
yeah, I'm gonna stand alone on that hill.
I like
but
the
that's-
first one, kind of.
We'll get
Do you
there.
just want to? Do you want to just knock those out now, or do you want to keep kicking?
Let's
the
just
can
kick
down?
that.
You've
can
already
down the
shit
road.
on me enough for the first like
David,
15
what did I
minutes,
say about interrupting?
that I should do it because it's my show.
No, that doesn't
Yeah.
sound like me.
No, it doesn't. That's because I'm putting words in your mouth. Okay. Anyway, so you guys, when was the first, or how did you get into Star Trek?
So, I grew up in a sort of a fan household. My dad had been a big sci-fi fan in the 50s and 60s, you know, growing up near
the golden age.
the golden age. I mean,
Yeah.
he'd grown up in New York City and out in Long Island, and had gone to all the movie theaters and seen like Forbidden Planet and all those movies, and
Right.
had become right from the start a huge Star Trek fan. You know, that was his college years. That was his bread and butter. He loved it and had all the books, and so I grew up in a house that was around the books. And when I was a kid, Channel 11 WPIX in New York would run Star Trek twice a night, every night during the weekdays. And then when I was, I guess it was when I was 3 or 4 years old, they premiered Next Generation on the same station on Saturdays. So I'd watch Trek, 12, 13 times a week, basically. And I remember my uncle threw a huge party for when Next Generation. So I was just basically in a family full of Trek nerds. My uncle threw a huge party for the first episode of Next Gen, and I remember turning to my mom when Riker gets on the bridge for the first time, and they do this big sweeping pan and it's just a beautiful shot that shows how much money they had sunk into this. And I just turned to her and I went, I'm going to be an actor when I grow up, because that was the one thing I knew that happened on TV. They were actors, and nobody else contributed. And from then it became, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a cinematographer, I'm going to be an editor. So Trek really did lead into what eventually became my career in film and television, which I pursued for a very long time after school. And it was, Trek's just sort of been in my life in every form since then. I've been a huge fan, so pretty much since the beginning of everything.
Yeah, that's awesome that not only were you kind of like born into the series and kind of raised in it, but it also delivered a very huge and monumental aha moment for you.
And it reinforced over and over again, because it's such great TV through all of these series. You can look at the hokiness of the original series, but it's still shot incredibly well through the whole thing. Next Generation was this incredible, like nothing else on TV looked like it at that point in time. It was so expensive and so imaginative, so you didn't have anything else like that. So it'd be appointment every week to like the whole family gets around and starts the wheels turning. DS9 did it. Voyager did it for as long as I could keep watching it. There's so much in this world that was so fascinating and so imaginative that I think that more than anything else I've ever been a fan of, and more than anything else that I've ever followed, I think this really broke both my eventual career and my imagination as a whole forward.
Sure. That's awesome. Tiffany, how did you get into the show? Is it as elaborate as that?
I don't know. We didn't have like a party, but I remember, one of my earliest memories that I don't remember a lot about being like a little kid, but I was 4 years old when Next Generation premiered, and I just remember my brother and I stayed up and we like put our sleeping bags on the floor in front of the TV, and then like every week we watched it. And I just remember like thinking it was the coolest thing, and I was like, I'm gonna go to Starfleet Academy when I grow up. And like I realized eventually that was not a real thing. It was very disappointing, but yeah, I just remember like we always watched it. My family always watched Star Trek every week, and then we watched Voyager and we watched Deep Space Nine, and it wasn't always cool to be a Trekkie living in Ohio in the 90s. And like I had like Wesley Crusher posters in my locker, and this is a real thing. I had a full-size cardboard cutout of Lieutenant Tom Paris in my bedroom. And I did get made fun of for these things, but I was very passionate about it.
Hey.
And it was just always there. And I feel like, I don't know, it kind of was like my moral compass, like growing up. Like I like feel like I learned a lot of things from like the Prime Directive or whatever. Like it just meant a lot to me when I was growing up.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I kind of wish that I was in the same boat as you guys. That I kind of grew up with it, because it really seems like one of those things for it to be cool to be brought up, like watching it, because you really, it not just if you grow up watching it with your family, but if that's not your situation, it seriously feels like you're part of a family that kind of grows up watching it. Like there's just so many other people out there that can relate to your personal feelings.
We always had a lot of sci-fi like around my house when I was growing up. My dad, he was from Germany, and he like had all these like sci-fi short story magazines, and some of them were in German and some were in English, but he'd like read us the stories and like translate them from German, and it was just super cool. I still remember some of them, like thinking back on stuff, but we were like a sci-fi household.
Sure, that's awesome. Ted, did you grow up with the series?
Yes and no. So I remember Next Generation premiered in like 89?
Yeah, around there, yeah.
So I was a little young for the premiere, but I remember being a little kid, 4 or 5, and like knowing of it. So probably around
we would have been 4.
Season 2, something like that. Probably is when I would have come in and like been aware of it. one of my uncles was really big into like what would sort of congeal into like the Comic Con experience, so like comic books and like sci-fi art and pulp art and stuff like that. He was actually an artist for a period of his life, and like he was really into Star Trek, the original series, and then like Star Wars was like the Bible to him, basically.
Right.
So then when the Next Generation came out, he was probably in his late 20s, I would say. And that was one of the things like that I started getting into. I remember being like 6 and going for Halloween as Riker.
Okay.
Awesome.
With like a painted on beard and everything. So like I was super into it in terms of like the Next Generation, which I think is why that's still like the most important one or like my favorite one. Because like I said, I grew up around that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The original series is, you know, it's for
a slog.
Yeah,
It's there.
a lot of people remember it really fondly for the good parts and don't ever think about the other like you know awful parts.
There are
of it.
about
Spock's brain.
25 really, really great episodes of the original series, and then the rest of it is...
like from mediocre to awful.
You know, there are some truly bad episodes,
Yeah.
and none of them are Spock's brain. Like, there are
Yeah.
like ones that are like... even
No,
worse than that.
right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, as I got into other things, I sort of drifted out of it and then kind of came back in. But they'll always be like they talk to the point of where it's just like there's always that part of you that's like, I remember this, and like there's always that kind of sort of special bond in a way that you have with it.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I wasn't able to grow up with it. Unfortunately, I didn't really grow up with a lot of nerdy shit that I'm into right now. My parents are none of my relatives, like we didn't really live close to any of our extended family, like uncles, aunts, grandparents, whatever. And then my parents weren't particularly nerdy. I grew up on Seinfeld. That was kind of the show that I was
It's not a
raised
bad
on.
way to grow up.
There's
I
not-
mean,
there's nothing
Hey,
bad about
I'm
Seinfeld.
not complaining. It's a fucking amazing show, classic. It's evergreen, and my
Jerry,
parents
you gotta watch Star Trek. It's awesome.
and my parents let me watch it because they knew that since I was so young, all the dirty jokes would just go over my head. So they were like, it's fine. What? My wife is here and she's talking shit.
They still go over your head.
Well, you're not wrong.
yeah, one of the best
Hello.
like clever. Yeah, one of the best.
I don't wanna talk
Or
about
one of
that.
my favorite like clever dirty jokes is from Seinfeld, and it's the episode where you can't remember the woman's name.
Oh yeah,
And
Mulva?
and then he's like, Dolores. That's such a good like
Yeah.
joke. It kills me every time.
Yeah, Larry David's a fucking great writer.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah. What's the next? Let me
Violently move on to
reference the
next
notes.
bullet point.
I believe it's what is Star Trek.
So that's
What's a Star Trek?
I like this because I put this on the list because not only is that like a fun question, but it's literally what the first pitch for Star Trek was called. That was the name of the document that Roddenberry brought to NBC, and he just called it "What is Star Trek?" And then I've read it. It's like 25 pages, and he just outlines like, here's what my crazy space show is going to be about. Here's what all the episodes are, and he like puts these 2-sentence references down for like all these episodes that eventually become real things. And you're reading this like mimeographed copy
Wow.
of something that he banged out on a typewriter while working for the LAPD. I actually want to backtrack a little bit here because you put up on the Facebook page for Geek Garage
Right.
that fantastic oatmeal comic about
Yeah.
Gene Roddenberry, which. Do you want to quickly summarize for folks who maybe haven't seen it or?
So the internet comic Matthew Inman, he heads the Oatmeal internet comic, and I actually got a chance to see him live. It was pretty cool. So if you ever get a chance to go see like someone speak live, especially if they're like, you know, have an internet presence and they're like working out material for stuff, which is what he was doing, definitely go do it because it's an incredible experience. But he wrote this comic that wasn't necessarily about Star Trek or Gene Roddenberry specifically, but it was adjacent, and it was kind of about it was about the plane that he was on and he was co-piloting, correct?
Yeah, he was a Pan Am commercial pilot.
Yeah.
I believe after leaving the service.
Right.
Yeah.
And it basically one of the engines gives out and it explodes and goes off the wing, and he's like consoling one of the women that's in coach trying to calm everyone down that are freaking out, rightfully so, because the fucking plane is going down. The plane crashes, 14 people, are dead, right off the bat, and the surviving members, they split into two teams, go in two different directions to try and find civilization so they can radio someone to get rescued. They end up getting rescued, and that co-pilot was Gene Roddenberry, and from that day on, he decided to not be a co-pilot anymore. He
I can't imagine why.
Yeah,
I'd never get on a
because
plane
he
again.
was in not just one, not just two, but 3 plane crashes. And
that's the story.
yeah, and I'm not exactly
At the
sure
end of the third
how
one,
that
was he like,
happens.
you know what? If we had like something that would just teleport us where we were going, we could avoid all this shit.
You're absolutely right. He probably came up with
That's
a
the
transporter.
genesis of Star Trek, right there. He was like, this plane crash shit sucks. Right.
Right.
the
Yeah,
birds.
and
Right.
yeah, and so I kind of just randomly remembered this comic, and Mac, I texted you the other night saying like, I think we were just going back and forth about stuff. I was watching the series and I was kind of like bouncing things off you, like, oh yeah, I'm on this episode and it's fucking hilarious. I see why people like this. And then I was like, by the way, like, do you know who the Oatmeal is? He was like, he did the Gene Roddenberry comic, and I was like, yes.
And what I love is the story that happens after that comic. What happens in Gene Roddenberry's life, and he was an incredibly complicated man in every. I don't really want to go into the dirt of who Gene Roddenberry was, but what was incredible is so he quits Pan Am and moves to LA and becomes a police officer. He just becomes a beat cop and decides he doesn't like this. He wants to start being a writer, so he manages to get into the speech writing department at the LAPD. And he uses this to basically make Hollywood contacts. He becomes the cop who knows people. And
not a bad plan.
Not a bad plan. And Star Trek wasn't his first major TV series. He did a show called The Lieutenant, which was about his experiences in the Army. Starred a guy named Gary Lockwood, who most people know from 2001. And he also plays Kirk's best friend on an episode of the original series, which where it's called Where No Man Has Gone Before, and it's still one of my favorite sci-fi anythings. I think it's just absolutely brilliant. But he's made the lieutenant, and that's run for a season or two, and he's sort of not made a lot of friends and probably made a couple of enemies because Gene Roddenberry is a belligerent man. Sure, and this is well known now. So he does What is Star Trek, which is this big document, and a lot of people say no, but he has this incredible producing team behind him, and he ends up at a group called Desilu, which had its own studio on Sunset Strip and was producing Mission Impossible at the time. And so they had extra cash.
Okay.
And they sort of said, all right, we'll let it go for a pilot, but we have to run it by the head of the studio, who at that point was Lucille Ball. And so Lucy was the one who gave the thumbs up on giving Star Trek the money to do its first
Interesting.
pilot.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that they did that first pilot, gave it to NBC. They said, this is the most extraordinary piece of television we've ever seen. We're not putting it on air. They said, it's too cerebral and too slow, and we don't understand it, and why is the girl green, and Jeffrey Hunter is too expensive to do the show. And so, but then they said, we want another pilot. Is Jeff Hunter still available? No, he's playing Jesus in some movie. True story. So that's where Shatner comes in, and the second pilot is the one that eventually aired, which is Where No Man Has Gone Before. They basically said, we need something that's very Western. So he said, all right, this guy becomes God and can do whatever, but Captain Kirk is going to punch him in the fucking face at the end, and he's going to lose all his God powers.
Because America.
Right.
Like, who's our lead? Well, the original captain was Captain Pike. He's from Southern California, and he rides horses, and he's very thoughtful. And then who's the second captain? He's from Iowa, and he punches people in the goddamn mouth.
That
Because
fucking guy.
America.
Right.
So, I mean, you can see where Trek was like, all right, we'll change this, and this to acquiesce to, but it never really lost that adventurous and kind of cool cerebral spirit. I think the first season is very cool in that it's a lot of, yes, it's adventurous, and yes, it is guys riding weird trucks and punching people and making out with green women and like all, but then it's also super serious and cerebral and has a whole episode about Shakespeare that also involves a really thoughtful version of PTSD for being on the air in 1967.
It was doing something that no other sci-fi show had at that point done. It wasn't just a Monster of the Week show. It wasn't just, Cowboys in Space. Like it was addressing things.
Yeah, and in some ways it was trying to do a lot of things that no other network show to that point had done. You know, it was, like you said, very adventurous, very cerebral, which, I mean, think about a lot of the shows that were on in this, you know, that 50s and 60s range, where it's just like the cowboy show this week is this, or like
Bounty Law featuring
Yeah.
JP.
Excellent pull.
My man.
But yeah, I mean, it's stuff like in that vein, right? Where it's just like, oh, it's the cowboy show, and it's very simple, and there's the good guy, and there's the bad guy, and then they have a shootout at the end. Right? And Star Trek sort of injected some of that gray-ish sort of morality into it, and made you think a little bit, even though, like we said earlier, it was very much like ham-fisted in some of its attempts.
Well, two thoughts here. This one first. There's an episode called Arena in the first season, which features. It's on YouTube. It's called "The Worst Fight Scene Ever." Is literally the name of the clip. It's Kirk is beamed down to a planet that's completely deserted except for one other lizard called the Gorn, and he's wearing like a chainmail suit, and he's just a guy in like a lizard head.
He's a badass,
and he's a bad. The Gorn is the
doesn't
best.
love the Gorn?
The Gorn is awesome, but it's about like this celestial being said we're gonna put these two down there, and whoever wins will save their society and will destroy the other because they're obviously weaker. And at the end, Kirk basically is picking up the rock and he says, "I won't kill him," and he tosses it aside, and that's, you know, the great morality play. Arena was a short story that didn't actually feature Star Trek originally, and was on the Outer Limits the same week. They aired another adaptation of it the same week, where the answer is, "I'm gonna fucking kill that guy."
Fuck him. He's not even from America. It was the 60s. You were so allowed to say
You're
that.
allowed to say that.
Right.
The Vietnam War is
a
raging,
very-
something.
Right.
It's a very different time. It's complicated.
Yeah.
History is complicated and messy.
Yes.
I want to, if I can interject here, you mentioned, of course, Captain Pike, the original captain, is from California. He's sort of that rugged, handsome, what a lot of people would consider that prototypical golden age of Hollywood, sort of, or golden age of California at least, sort of hero.
Yeah.
And then they change over to Shatner and Kirk, and he's from like Iowa, which is very middle America and this and that. But I feel like that character still kept a lot of that California aspect of like rugged and individualistic and handsome and adventurous.
They made him a thoughtful woodsman. Like they show that
Yeah,
he
okay,
loves.
I can dig
He
that.
has a library in his quarters. They show that he owns Dickens and he owns Shakespeare and he reads
We do hear
extensive.
see him chop some wood later.
Yeah, and then he literally like more than once has been shown to be like chopping wood out there in the wilderness. So he's less like.
Well, you got to prove that you're a man.
Exactly.
Right.
No, but it's So it's, you're right. It's a lot of that like still like sun-kissed like what passed for fit in the 1960s man.
Right.
Like this guy smokes 3 packs a day.
He's the in shape, out of shape guy.
Right. He's got a
Exactly.
barrel chest. Right. He's got like a barrel chest. Looks like he's never seen the inside of a gym, but also could probably like tear down a tree with his bare hands
Right.
somehow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's funny that they went from Jeffrey Hunter, who had been he had starred with John Wayne in The Searchers. He had been in The Longest Day. He had literally played Jesus Christ in King of Kings.
Yes. All
And
excellent movies. by the way.
All 3 of those are excellent
Yes.
films. And then they went to Shatner, who was
Some guy.
Yeah, well, what was interesting is that he had already done 2 of the most famous Twilight Zone episodes by that point.
That's true.
Like, he had done Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. He had done a couple episodes of Climax. He was well known on the New York stage. He was this thoughtful, Quebecois Jewish man in his mid-30s who was very much the antithesis of everything Jeffrey Hunter was, yet still managed to be this same, like, rugged, individualistic hero. They just made him a little bit more... It's weird to call Kirk
Iowan.
bookish. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
Iowan.
Yeah. Iowan. Yeah.
And it's always weird to think, that you had this show on the air in America in the 1960s where the 2 credited leads were Jewish, and which I still think is flabbergasting and wonderful. But
Sure.
So right after college, I was seeing a young woman who was her father was Japanese, and she had never seen Star Trek before. And I thought, all right, I'll pick my favorite episodes out and we'll watch some. And so I started with an episode called The Corbomite Maneuver, which is a classic. Kirk outthinks an alien by just talking real fast, and it's almost all set on the bridge, and it's just the regular characters plus 1 extra guy. And she's watching it, and she comes to me afterwards and says, "I'm used to today having Asian characters be window dressing. They get 2 lines, and you're lucky that they're there." George Takei, I know as George Takei the person. He's known as the activist. You don't realize until you see Sulu in a Sulu-heavy episode that he is right there. He is a decision maker. He is part
he matters.
of the. He matters so much. He steers the ship. He is in control of the Enterprise, and that was shocking in 2008 imagine what it's like in the midst of the Vietnam War,
Right.
in 1966. That stunned me even as a fan of 20 plus years at that point.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting sort of, I guess what now you would call like diverse aspects
Right.
of the original series, where it's just like Ahura is a main character, and
Yeah.
it's just
Right.
like,
It's almost like if you were going to go back and take a really educated look at the series, or just kind of go through the original series and maybe the rest of the other iterations of Star Trek, like you kind of need to accompany it with like American history lessons,
Yeah.
because they pair.
And I don't know, like, as Trekkies, we probably all have heard this story, but I don't know if you know, Uhura was going to quit the show. She wanted to do stage acting. Was that what it was?
And they also weren't going to pay her enough to do the second season.
So she was going
Okay.
to quit, and then Martin Luther fucking King was like, "What are you talking about? You can't, like, you are on the bridge, lady. Like, we need you there. Like, you have to keep doing this." And she was like, "Wow, I guess I have to keep doing this. Like, Martin Luther King is telling me I have to do this because representation matters, and it's true.
Right.
Like, you know, like, it's a big deal. Like,
That's
he's
that's
like,
kind of
us
crazy
seeing
that
you up there every week on that bridge is a big deal, and he
Yeah.
wasn't wrong. You know, especially then,
Wow.
especially right
right,
then.
right. I mean, like you said in 2008, somebody's pointing out to you like, oh, this is like
Yeah.
a strong, meaningful Asian character in a series from like the middle 60s or
Yeah.
the late 60s. You know, it's like the American culture, the American entertainment culture specifically, like still struggle with shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to go back and see, like, in the midst of all this like terrible shit's going on, like Jim Crow and the end of like segregation and all this, is like there's an important black character
Yeah.
on this show set in fucking space. And
it-
it's just like,
Uhura has my favorite joke in the history of Star Trek as a whole, which is there's an episode called The Naked Time where everybody goes nuts because they're intoxicated by polywater. It's a long story. Anyway, Sulu gets oiled up and he gets a sword and he chases his way, like stabbing people to the bridge. And he sees Uhura and he yells, "I'll save you, my fair maiden." And she goes, "Sorry, neither."
that's excellent.
And I'm like, that's the most subtle bit. Like, here's this oiled up dude with a sword, and you're like, here's a grammar joke.
that's pretty good.
I just like to imagine that is a George Takei power fantasy that he somehow convinced them to write in.
I have a great lithograph card of that with him with the sword.
Oh my.
Who doesn't?
One thing that I was kind of curious about is so Lucille Ball, she's the one who gave it the green light, the thumbs up. Like, what was her? What is it written in history specifically? Why she decided yes?
There's no real good primary source of why she gave the thumbs up on funding the pilot. I know that at that point, Desilu knew that they could make money with action shows because at that point, I think Mission Impossible was in like season 2 or 3, and it was the biggest thing on TV at that point. And they know they needed more hits because this was well after Lucy and Desi's divorce. There was a whole bunch of basically, I think that it just made financial sense. The story sometimes goes that she didn't know what Star Trek was. She just sort of saw action adventure, and then saw Jeffrey Hunter's name on it, and then she just sort of like gave the thumbs up and said, "Okay, fine, here's
Sure.
$500,000, go make it."
Right on.
But I think they were the producing partner for the first 2 seasons, and I think they were set up shop at their studios, and it's incredible to see how much they built this set for the first episode, and then once you've got the bridge, you never have to build that again. You know?
Right.
It's such a financial. It's a
It's a
financial
sunk cost
sense.
for sure.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
But then you recoup it basically by not having to do it again.
Yeah.
Especially when you see we're going to zoom into the Enterprise bridge through the top window shot that's in, I think, every 3rd episode. Like, if you're reusing shots like that, you're making your money back pretty quickly.
And to be fair, that's not just we're making Star Trek for cheap thing. That's like a very like 50s, 60s TV thing.
Oh yeah, no question. It's like, look, when you see Maverick ride by on the same horse every week, you're just burning through the 52 minutes you have to fill.
For sure.
Yeah.
Mac, it says here in your notes that there's stereotypes of what Trek is versus what it actually is.
And your wife passed me a note about the red shirts, and I'd like to point this. So there's this.
Oh yeah, she
there's
mentioned
this-
it earlier today. She wanted to.
There's
bring
this
this up.
joke, and I've seen the math on this, that every time... So if you've never seen the show, any one of these Star Trek shows, the uniforms are color coded. If you are in command, either piloting or on the bridge as a captain or first officer, you're wearing yellow. If you're in the sciences, you're wearing blue. If you are in engineering or security, which gets huge quotes around it, you're wearing red. So every time Kirk's...
Security is a fucking reach.
It's a flimsy term right there. So
doing a lot of heavy lifting.
every time, so they'll say, like, well, we've encountered a Class M planet. It's habitable, and there seems to be life signs down there. And Kirk's like, all right, Dr. McCoy and Mr. Spock and me and Ensigns Leslie and Ricky and Bob. You're all going down to the planet with me.
And I'll give you some insider information here. It ain't the stars that are gonna die.
That is
Ricky and Joey and Bob.
Yeah.
to quote Mitch Hedberg, that's the kind of thing that happened once. And so you had these guys in red shirts who were all holding guns, and they've got their like little prop recorders out, and they're like walking through the desert or through the jungle or whichever set was free that week.
Basically.
On the
Meadow
Desilu
full of
set.
flowers.
Oh yeah, the flower episode.
Didn't they also film in Barstow?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
They went up there. That's where they fought the Gorn.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
where he got his
They
head knocked
recreated
by
that
it.
on The Big Bang Theory.
They did, yeah. They did.
That's kind of how I know
yeah.
that, ashamedly. But hey,
Hey,
it's knowledge.
but you know
Knowledge
it.
is knowledge. Like,
No.
whatever.
Fuck you,
I
Terry.
wasn't gonna say it.
But as it goes, you'll have a guy beam down, and they'll find out that there's a killer robot down there, and it throws Ensign Ricky gets himself thrown off the side of a cliff, and they all go, "What happened?" And then there's one red guy down, and so the red shirts. If you watch enough episodes, it happened enough that my favorite one being they once beamed down to a settlement of sort of like American Indian stereotypes, and there were also Klingons there, and they beam down, and the guy one of the red shirts goes, "A Klingon," and then he gets stabbed in the chest, and he dies, and that's where that stereotype came.
Strangely, also the best acting of that episode.
Oh god, that is that one's a real dog.
Yeah.
Aaron DeMercy's a real dog. But yeah, so there's the red shirt joke. There's the Kirk seduces green women, which he didn't. That was Pike.
And gets space syphilis.
And yeah, he gets space syphilis. Like, he sleeps with everybody. Like, no, Kirk blew an engagement and was so despondent that he couldn't see his kid anymore that he went into deep space where he read Charles Dickens and thought deep thoughts about poker.
He's basically an incel at that point.
You heard it here.
But like Spock is exactly what everybody thinks he is, except that he's a lot more emotional. His mom's human, etc., etc., etc. There's a
Kind of funny.
yeah, and he's
He's
truly
pretty funny.
he's truly funny.
Yeah,
And,
Spock was always my favorite.
Yeah.
Spock.
Spock's-
Second to Riker.
Yeah.
But Spock was always my favorite, the
Two
original.
fantastic actors. I mean, Jonathan Frakes was a
Absolutely.
great actor, and we can. I want to talk about this a little bit later. And and Leonard Nimoy just knew exactly what he was doing.
For sure.
Which is why he's the only member of the cast to ever get an Emmy nomination.
Yeah, because he was good.
Because he was great, and so you have these stereotypes of like sort of I can put together a stereotypical Star Trek episode, and then you watch one, and you'll go to like, well, Kirk is on leave to see his brother, but then his brother got stabbed by a space manta ray. And
As happens.
as happens, and that brother is played by Shatner in a mustache. Literally the plot of Operation Annihilate. Like, this show is always goofier than you'd even think from like the
Definitely.
stereotypes, but it also has these things where people are like, this is what Star Trek is. And I'm like, yeah, it's the thing that happened once.
Yeah.
And and the
But
real
somehow
Star
that's what endures.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, like I said, people remember the good stuff about it and forget or brush over the bad stuff. Like, one of my favorite aspects of the original series, particularly in the early episodes where it's like set in the 23rd century or 24th century, and it's like the future, and we have all this great tech, and it's like they still have fucking analog measurement
Yeah.
devices where it's like, oh, and the fucking thing is click 8, click 9, click, oh no, you know what I mean?
something somewhere spitting out like 8 feet of paper.
Exactly. And it's just like it's but that's kind of endearing in a way
Yeah.
too, so it's just like that's one of the things that is like, I don't know if that works, but at the same time I'm kind of like, all right,
But I love the early episodes where they're still trying to figure out what the future looks like,
Right.
or
Oh,
like
for
what,
sure, for sure.
especially when they had a rotating cast of almost guest stars, like guys who would be in 4 or 5 episodes as crewmen. This guy,
Right.
like there are 2 doctors on the Enterprise. There's Bones, who everybody knows, and then there's Dr. Mbenga, who no one remembers and is in like 3 or 4 episodes. And then there's like Mr. Riley, who's just this ensign who has major PTSD and at one point accidentally crashes the ship. And there's like all of
That's
this.
why he's only still an ensign.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. It's he turns off the warp engines and sends them hurtling into a planet. And then the next episode, it turns out that the guy who killed his parents is hiding as a Shakespearean actor on the ship. That is one episode, and then the next episode, and then that guy quit to be a hippie. But
which, to be fair, I get it.
There's this wonderful playfulness about their early episodes where it's like we don't know who the real stars of this show are. We don't know what this crew looks like. There are 400 people on the Enterprise. Who's there? What does this
Who do we
look like?
focus in on?
Yeah.
Do we need to focus in on anybody, or can it just be like a cast of the week sort of thing?
Yeah, can it be like, here's Mr. Spock and Captain Kirk on the bridge, and then here's Yeoman Rand, or, Yeoman Colt, or Mr. Seven, or like whoever's going to walk through this week. And I think that it's lost in the stratification of what Star Trek is now. Like, everyone knows what Star Trek is. So you don't get that incredible open world playfulness, which I also love in the fact that in maybe the 3rd episode is exactly that moment with the analog timer where their star date is shown on individual click reels, like they're measuring how many people came in the auditorium. Yeah. It's amazing.
Wow. Where are we at in the notes?
I mean, we're still talking about the original series.
I went on a thing.
No, it's all right. Did we cover the stereotypes of what Trek is?
That's what we just did. Thank you, David, for joining us. Moving right along to the animated series and the movies.
Oh my god! So what's crazy in the history of Star Trek is that in '69 it's canceled because it gets moved to the worst possible time slot. It's on at, I believe, 10:30 on Friday nights. And nobody is home to watch a show at 10:30 at Friday. And there is one good episode two good episodes maybe in the 3rd season. And after that, they just give up. There's one episode where Kirk, and I am not making this up, punches Abraham Lincoln so hard that Abraham Lincoln evaporates.
To be fair, we don't know that that's not what happened in real life.
It's true. That might have been how John Wilkes Booth assassinated him.
Actually, Abraham Lincoln once said, "If you are a racist, I will attack you with the North." Fun fact.
He said that.
That's true.
He said that.
He said that. Yeah, that's true.
That comes from a reliable source.
So that's the
Michael
second,
Gary Scott.
That's the second to last episode of the whole series.
And you wonder why.
And you wonder why. It's canceled in '69. It goes into syndication almost immediately. But in like 1972 or 3, blows up. The toy line comes out, and the board games come out, and they're immediate successes. Suddenly, Paramount and Desilu and NBC are making hundreds of millions of dollars a year off of Star Trek, and so everyone goes, "Can we get this back?" Like, there's literally a memo at the studio that says, "Hey, do we still have the sets?" And they said, "No, we set them on fire.
Right.
Like, we got rid of them because the show was canceled."
That's pretty fucking hardcore, though.
Yeah, it's like that's what they used to do.
It feels like, cult classics. The term cult classic might predate this, but it almost, if it doesn't, like, it almost seems like Star Trek was like it. Could be where the cult classic could be coined from
for the first 2 or 3 years, absolutely, and then
right.
by '74 when the animated series shows up and it wins an Emmy for Best Animated Series on Television, I think. Oof. And it's the only Trek to ever win Best Series, which when you watch the animated series, you wonder, why the fuck did that happen?
How I wonder why.
Then again, if you watch animated series from the 1970s, you're kind of like, all right, I get it.
All right, I get it.
Pin it up against all that, yeah, it makes sense.
It went nuts that they had they had 2 seasons of this, they had all the reruns, and so there was years of them trying to get a movie or a new TV series run. Mm-hmm. They even actually had a full TV series cast, new sets built, new scripts commissioned, and then Star Wars happens. And
yeah. Now, you may know this a little bit better than I do, but mid-70s, Shatner's already moved on to being a detective at this point, right?
Well, that T.J. Hooker is right as motion picture comes out. So that's 79. Okay. He was doing a show called Barbary Coast, which is about pirates in California.
Right.
And he for a while there, he does some really bad horror movies. He does Kingdom of the Spiders and stuff like that. And for a while, he's just Captain Kirk.
Right.
That's what he does. But Star Wars comes out, and every single studio is like, "What space thing do we have? What's our thing? Do we have
it's
a
a license to print money."
Right. Yeah. And everybody's like, "We need a Star Wars." And Paramount goes, we have a Star Wars. Stop making the TV show. It needs to be a movie right now. Fire this guy.
So
Add
that's
this guy.
that's what kind of spurned the big Trek. Sorry, I guess weird word to choose there. Long stretch run of movies before we get to the next series.
Well, what's crazy is that in 77, basically every script they'd written so far for what they were calling Phase 2 at that point, they just sort of go through and go, which one of these can be a movie? Have we written one before? Yeah, Philip Kaufman, who's going to write Raiders of the Lost Ark eventually. He wrote a script. How is it? Oh, it's crap. Okay, let's go. What else do we have? And they're just, so it's basically like this 6 months scramble to be like, can we get all the actors back? What's happening here? Leonard Nimoy doesn't want to do it. Can we give him more money than God? Yes, we can. And they just start like, there's this craziness at Paramount, and then so it's like October of 77 when Star Wars has made all the money in the world, and by
literally,
it's now the highest grossing film by an order of magnitude.
Well, I'm going to be the pretentious ass for a minute, and I'm going to argue that because Gone with the Wind, adjusted for inflation,
is still
made
the highest. Yeah.
More money than the Beatles.
It would have been today $2.5 billion at the box office, and Star Wars would have done about like 1.7.
Yeah. But I will allow that the general consensus is that Star Wars for a long period of time was the most profitable
film of all time. Yeah, and so then by December of 79, they had a hard date of we have to make Christmas of 79 with this movie. So they got the whole cast back. They had sets built for Star Trek Phase 2, which was going to be the TV series. They filmed some of the movie, said these don't work. They scrapped it all. They rebuilt everything. They lit it
all on fire, actually.
Again, it was crazy.
History repeats itself. Weird. Just, I don't know.
So that movie has a very troubled
global
production.
Warming. I'm sorry. We're done with that joke now. We're moving on.
It has a very troubled production period, and I think that's why a lot of fans hold it in not contempt, but at least I know it's no one's favorite. Mm-hmm. I think that it's a very interesting film. I think we can have a large discussion about
it.
We're talking about the first one, Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
I believe you have to say Star Trek: The Motion Picture, rated G. As they did in every commercial. Orson Welles did the commercials for this film.
That is elaborate.
It's like, this is what he goes like, this is a shared experience of the last dozen years. Over 46 countries, 1.9 billion people. And now the experience comes to you. And it's like this totally pretentious trailer where they like show very little of the movie. It's like you're going like cresting over a planet, and then you see the Enterprise.
Just glamour shots.
Oh yeah, just glamour. The movie is mostly glamour.
Glamour shots.
Yeah, that's because the script was like 12 pages. They took a TV script and were like, all right, stretch it out for another 60 minutes and let's just see what happens, guys.
I kind of almost wish they would revert back to that kind of cutting and editing of trailers, because I just think they show too damn much these days. Like, I hate
watched
going
the
in.
whole movie.
Yeah.
I need to go see it.
Yes, some trailers are better than others with giving things away, and like with Star Wars, I thought they gave you saw a lot of the movie, but they were still pretty good at saying, look over here, and they were really doing stuff over here.
Misdirection.
Yeah, misdirection. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
Ray, that shuttle, it has Chewie on it. That one there, no other shuttle has Chewie on it.
I'm gonna be honest. I kind of cried at that scene.
We all did. Okay.
I thought he was really dead. Yeah.
And it's not like I can say the Star Trek movies are on the whole better written than that.
Yeah,
they're pretty bad.
There are like, I think of the 13, 14, however many there are now, I think there are about 4 bona fide classics, and then the rest go from okay to pretty bad.
Right.
Yeah, I can't remember which of the motion pictures it is. It's in that the original run of them with the original cast, but where it's the satellite, I think, that's like an old Earth satellite.
Yeah. That's motion picture, yeah.
Is it motion picture? Okay, I wasn't sure if it was or not.
And then after motion picture, we have Khan!
What's really weird is like he was just a throwaway villain almost from the original series, and then they're like, "Hey, Ricardo Montalban guy though."
So there's a great story behind the writing of that script, though. So, I mean, how long? Nicholas Myers wrote that script in 7 days or something crazy
6 or
like
7
that.
days,
Like he had literally only seen a few episodes of Star Trek, but there had been so many different versions of this script, and like nobody could get one that they liked. And then he was like, I'm going to approach this. This is going to be Hornblower in space. And he wrote it like, this is the captain of a ship. This is the conflict. This is what's going to happen. He watched a few episodes. That's the character that he picked. And it turned out to be, most people's favorite Star Trek movie.
I was about to say, granted, with a grain of salt, we've discussed this already, that different Star Trek fans have different, differing opinions. That's comes with the territory, but the overwhelming majority of the people that I've talked to, they all say that the Wrath of Khan is kind of like one of the best movies, that came after the original series, but like preceded the the Abrams films and all the newer stuff.
It doesn't treat you like a moron.
Yeah.
This is a movie that meets you, and it also says, all right, so people are going to be coming into this film who know everything about Star Trek. I've seen all 79 episodes. I've read all the books. They have the RPG at home. And then they're going to be people coming in here who have never seen a single second of Star Trek before, ever. And so the first 10 minutes are perfectly created to say, here's what these characters are about.
Yeah.
Here's your entry character, and that they create. Kirstie Alley plays a Vulcan named Savick, who is young and inexperienced and has just joined the crew, and she's done as your entryway character. Like, she is just meeting all these people, so you have this like, all right, you're new, you don't know what Star Trek is. Here's Star Trek. Or if you're already in here, they go, whoa, here's this new Vulcan. What's her deal? You have this new. So it treats everybody on the same level of, here's a story. We'd like to tell you it, and we'd like to tell you it like an adult,
which is. Historically speaking, a very, very complicated line to draw and toe, and it's one that I have to do as someone who runs a podcast and like picks out topics like this. And like it was the same thing with the D&D episode, where it was our first D&D episode, and I wanted to make it to where it was accessible for everyone, where it wasn't boring for the people that like advanced players, but it wasn't so advanced and complicated for someone that had never played before, like me, but was interested in learning about it. And it turned out to be, in my opinion, one of the most successful episodes. So it's cool that that movie was able to toe that line really well.
And you got to go back to basics sometimes. I mean, when you have that much, you know who these characters are. Let's free you of the burden of having to know everything about everything. Here's who they are. Let's go forward. Which is why from 2 to 6 to Undiscovered Country, they draw a direct, almost day after day, in medias res line of a narrative. That from Khan to Undiscovered Country, everything follows on to the next one, which leads to her favorite movie, which is Star Trek III: The Search for Spock.
I love Search for Spock.
It's a good movie.
I don't know if it's my favorite.
What happens in Search for Spock?
They search for Spock.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far into spoiler territory.
I don't want to spoil things, though. Star Trek II is probably my favorite. And Star Trek 3 is probably like a close runner-up. They're right there both for me, but
I feel like a bad husband not
I don't
being
know
able
if
to know
that's
which
true
one's your
either,
favorite
though.
Trek
I don't
movie.
know. It's hard to pick, honestly.
David, what is Lindsay's favorite Star Trek movie?
I
See,
don't know.
you're not alone. That's fine.
I mean, we're not big Trekkies. It's always been Star Wars.
Yeah.
But to be fair, or on the flip of that, I don't know what her favorite Star Wars movie is.
See,
so.
you're alone.
I do love Search for Spock, though.
Yes. I mean,
Do you have a favorite Star Wars movie, honey?
No.
It's Empire,
says
like
no.
everybody else. Move right along.
No, it's Empire. Which is why it's funny that, okay, so there's what's informally known as the trilogy in Star Trek, which is 2, 3, and 4 all take place with no break in their narrative. That there's, well, and 5 does too, but fuck 5.
Yeah, I was going to just let it ride, man.
Yeah.
You were cool.
Yeah.
That's a
So-
good band name. Good band name. I called it.
Five.
Fuck 5.
So
Force 5.
Khan, Search for Spock, Voyage Home all take place because of the same inciting series of events. And it's really interesting that, you have people talk about like this trilogy of really excellent films that all sort of hang together. And then you get Star Trek fans who all talk about which one of their ones is their favorite. And 2 and 4 are usually battled out for favorites because 4 is literally an 80s road comedy. in that it's a time travel movie where they go back to 1986 in San Francisco and wacky things
so
happen.
Good, though.
It's so good.
It's so good.
It really does a great job of being like so over the top that it somehow like is back into okay, this works territory.
It's just so good.
When Scotty tries to talk to a Macintosh because he thinks that it's voice activated.
Yeah.
And then they tell him to use the mouse, and he picks the mouse up and talks into the mouse.
Computer? Hello, computer.
Yeah. Like I said, it's so insane that it somehow comes back to like, okay, this works.
Yeah. It's I actually have the Laserdisc framed in my house.
It's the most quotable, maybe.
Oh, it's the most quotable.
I don't know if I've ever heard the words Laserdisc and framed
I have
come
a
out of anyone's
What
mouth.
else are you
I have
going
a
to
bunch
do with
of
it,
them,
man?
I would probably frame it.
I like laser discs for the sheer fact that they're insane, and whoever thought them up should both be ridiculed and given a medal of some kind.
Right,
do
like,
have
hey, do you
medal
know
that is a
vinyl
Laserdisc.
records? Yeah. But movies.
Okay,
like,
but
like
the
movie
audio
form.
is completely uncompressed on Laserdisc, which means that for a long time it was the best option for your sound system.
That's true.
The AC3 stuff on there was actually fantastic. And
Okay.
that's why I did have a couple of buddies who had Laserdisc players, so we would like test it on stuff like Twister, or like if you were watching Air Force One or whatever, you could like have this as a full surround experience.
Sure.
Which was awesome. They were also cumbersome as shit.
Yeah, it's like a vinyl record, except it's a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a Laserdisc player in like 6th grade, and the teacher spent literally like 2 hours trying to get it to
Same.
work.
Oh, where it was like the one where you
Same.
could select the different like experiments to show on the.
We didn't even get that far. We had no idea what was on that motherfucking Laserdisc. Like,
It's a
it could have been
mystery.
Jesus giving a T-Rex a hand job. Like,
I don't think it was that.
it probably
But
wasn't,
that
but it
episode
could
of
have been.
Voyager is great.
That is the deep cut episode,
my
sir.
Hey, if that's a Voyager episode, I will watch it.
And then
Remember-
Janeway and Tom Paris have a slug baby. The end.
Oh god.
Janeway the fascist.
Janeway the Fat. Yeah. I love that there is a museum about her on an alien planet, and they're like, she was a space Nazi. I'm like, not far off.
No, that is so accurate it hurts. That's one of the reasons I always like the "Who's your favorite captain?" question, because if someone says Janeway, I'm immediately like, arm's length.
Does that kind of bring us to the next generation?
Yeah.
should-
So,
The undiscovered country does indeed lead into that.
well, what's funny is, so I had, growing up, I had, everyone had like the 4 VHS tapes that they had. If you
Yeah.
were like of the VHS generation, you had like the Star Wars trilogy plus 2. Like, those were the movies that you had in your house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's like so accurate it hurts.
one of mine was Star Trek 4, which when it was released, so 4 did insanely well at the box office. It was...
And Nimoy directed that one, right?
Yeah, Nimoy directed
Yeah.
that one. Led to that great Futurama joke about when I directed Star Trek 4, I got a magnificent performance out of Bill because I respect him so much. And when I directed Star Trek 5, I got a magnificent performance out of me because I respect me so much.
Yeah.
And so it does $100 and some million back when that was still a really difficult thing to
big
do.
number,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was like the second or third highest grossing film of the year. And it had been released at Christmas and it made almost all that money immediately. So at that point they said, we have all those scripts for Phase 2 still lying around we didn't use for the motion picture. Can we do a new series? Mm-hmm. And so Roddenberry comes back, and they're like, all right, you have free reign to make this. And he puts out his first proposal, and they go, you no longer have free reign to make this. And within 3 months, he's basically off the show already. Like, before it even gets on the air, he's basically gone from Next Generation. But Voyage Home is out in December of 86, and September 23rd of 87, Next Generation's on the air.
Okay.
So it's an incredibly quick turnaround.
Yeah, yeah.
But the video release of Voyage Home has a minute-long teaser for Next Generation that introduces you to each of the characters. And I can probably still do it from memory because I have seen this movie about 1 billion times. And it just sort of goes like, it's like Starfleet veteran Jean-Luc Picard, William Riker, executive officer, Data on Android. And it just...
Data never got any respect
No,
other than from Picard.
never
I love
did.
Data. He's funny.
Data's great.
Data's great.
Yeah.
But it's just so funny to do stuff like Geordie LaForge, a man with unique vision. And here comes LeVar Burton with a carburetor strapped to his face.
First of all, it was a hair clip.
Yeah, the carburetor was like season 3 when they had a budget.
Yeah.
I think I realized that I was going to dig the Next Generation when I started the pilot, and Picard was walking around like just talking to random crew members, and he starts talking to Data, and he says something like kind of bizarre, and he's like, I'm looking forward to getting to know you better, Data. And I was like, just the way he said it, like with his fucking
Yes.
his charm, and I'm like, I want to be your
He
friend.
goes, will you agree, Data, that Starfleet's orders to us have been difficult? And it's like the first line of the show. I'm like, we're going to start from here?
Yeah, Patrick Stewart always brought like this weird, I'm a serious British actor sort of gravitas to his show about space people.
And honestly, I appreciate that.
I do too.
Here's why Star Trek always worked. Because on that bridge, you have a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company. You have one of the most celebrated soap actors in Jonathan Frakes.
Yep.
You've got 3 different Broadway actors. Brent Spiner had just come off of 2 different Tony-nominated shows when he was also on Night Court at the same time, which is amazing. And then LeVar Burton, I mean, off of Roots, Reading Rainbow, which was in its 5th or 6th season by that point. LeVar Burton was pretty much famous for being LeVar Burton.
Yeah.
But all of these people came from incredibly serious, well-trained, classical backgrounds. And in the case of the Doctor, you had a Muppeteer. Gates McFadden had done the choreography for Labyrinth. She had done some of the Muppet work for Muppets Take Manhattan. She appears in human garb in that as well as a secretary. And I just keep going like, Dr. Crusher? Like, the only person who wasn't really well trained on that show was Will Wheaton. And it shows.
Sure. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yeah. And then they bring in Whoopi Goldberg, fresh off Jumpin' Jack Flash.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's a pull,
That
sir.
was an excellent pull.
Yeah.
I
But
will say, like, watching Next Generation now, like, a lot of us are annoyed by Wesley, but when I was a kid, I was all about him.
Yeah.
You know, I was just
That's
like,
because kids are dumb.
I'm gonna put a
Moving around
poster of this guy in my locker.
And also, like, to have an entry point for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, everybody has their character. Even in the first season, you're walking around, you're like, who's your favorite on the bridge? Mine was Tasha Yar because I'm an idiot.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I'll always have a soft spot for Worf, who is the
yeah.
worst Klingon of all time.
Oh, for sure.
He's just like, my race is a race of proud, strong warriors. Now I'm going to go get my ass kicked for 400
I'm gonna drink a
episodes
prune
straight.
juice.
Right.
I think it was a couple weeks ago, I started watching The Next Generation, and I texted Ted, like, hey, just a heads up, I'm about to start watching this, because we had discussed that we were going to do this episode, and he mentioned, and then Mac mentioned that would be a decent place to start, and then I start getting into it, and he like randomly sends me a YouTube video where it's just a string of like classic
Worf getting the shit kicked out of him.
that, and like just clips from him, and I was like, I'm gonna enjoy this series.
Just like tumbling over the console.
Worf is the best worst character because, like I said, he's just like he's such a like Klingon supremacist basically, and then literally every other episode is just like, oh, and Worf just got the shit kicked out of him again.
No other Klingon acts like him.
I know.
No other Klingon acts like him, but he's always like the Klingon way. But like none of the other Klingons act like that.
Also, remember when literally the Fiddler on the Roof shows up and it's his dad? Like 4 seasons in, they're like, oh, he's adopted. What? And his parents are like the most Russian Jewish people in the... Excuse me? And his brother is Paul Sorvino.
Yeah.
No.
Oh my God.
Nothing about this man.
Even at 6, I was like, I'll buy that.
But yeah, like as soon as I started it, you know, I watched it. I think I got about all the way through the first episode, and then like Mac, you told me, you were like, yeah, it's not the best pilot ever, and I was like, honestly, I kind of loved it.
Yeah.
Like,
it's fun. It's got some great stuff.
Yeah, granted, I don't have much to pit it up against, but I could have gone in an opposite direction. Like, okay, this is garbage. But you know, I like, yeah, it's super cheeseball, and you know, the acting and you know, other elements of it leave something to be desired. But I got a lot out of it. I like. Just getting through the pilot, I was like, I 100% get why people are into this series.
Yeah, and think of it from like 1987. In the first 2 hours,
Exactly.
you've got like insane special effects. You've got that whole saucer separation thing. You've got this you've got this captain who hates everything, especially children and himself.
Yeah. I was
A lot of things happen.
I was like, as a dad, I relate to this so fucking
Like
hard.
a deep spiritual level of
Right,
relation.
yeah.
And then they like, here's this crazy omniscient being who feels the need to pester this old bald man for 2 hours. And like, here's
Just
World
'cause.
War III. Yeah, it's just there's
'cause.
like all this stuff they throw at you. So it's a great pilot in that way that like this show shows so much promise. And then they like start talking about like Tasha Yar's weird upbringing on Planet Destructo or whatever, and like they
Tough
like
name.
the tough luck entry for her, and they're like, well, like way back when Captain Picard got Wesley's dad murdered, and also I think he might have banged his mom, so we're gonna have to deal with all this for a while. Spoiler, they don't.
Yeah.
Not unrelated instances.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And I think I got to like the second or third episode, and it was the one where the infection comes in, or and they all get drunk and horny,
Which is a remake of an original series
yeah,
episode.
yeah. I remember it was either you or Tiffany that responded to my text about that. I was like, "This is the episode I'm on, and it is super entertaining." Yeah. What? Anything else about the next gen that we want to touch on?
We gotta talk favorite
We all
episodes.
kind of lean forward, like, actually.
Yeah, actually. So I'm always curious because, in my experience, this has been somewhat of a divisive topic, right? How do you feel about the Borg?
The Borg.
David the adults are talking.
I don't know where I stand on the Borg. I feel like in some ways it's kind of annoying how in the Next Generation it's basically like
They're
this is the
overpowered as
end all be all.
fuck.
Yeah, they are
Yeah.
like the super overpowered mega villains. Like they are here to like ruin the whole entire universe.
Yeah, I should have been more specific. How do you feel about the Borg in the Next Generation?
Yeah, but then later I feel like they, later
They
on
sort of reel it in
Voyager
some.
and stuff. It's different, but I don't know. I don't know where I stand on the Borg. I have to say I do like the episodes where Jean-Luc Picard gets kind of pulled into everything and Locutus and all that, and how that kind of ties in later to Deep Space Nine.
For sure.
I think that it's just not as consistent as I would like it to be through the different series.
Okay, that's fair.
I think the Borg work best when they're either the first introduction. I watched Q Who again the other day preparing for this, and their first introduction, that hour of TV is terrifying as hell.
Yeah.
It is. They put, here is one Borg drone, and then the ship is over there, and you are still, like, it's an hour of, like, everyone on the ship is going to die.
Yeah.
You are absolutely sure of it. And then then they have like, oh, what's going to be next? And then, I think they get way overpowered. I think Best of Both Worlds is good, but it does. I don't think it holds up in subs. It was such an event when it appeared that I think parsing it as just an episode now is kind of a weirder thing.
Right.
But I love them as a metaphor for sort of escaping fascism.
Yeah.
That family.
Okay.
When you have that episode where Picard comes back and he's just at the chateau, and he just has the moments with his brother to explain, they took everything from me. You can't understand. You weren't there. You don't know. And it's this overwhelming horror of what happened to him. And the same thing with Hugh. When you get to that, is like, here is this Borg who's been detached, and now he has to deal with himself again. He no longer can justify his actions.
Individual versus collective.
Yeah,
Right,
it's,
And
you can
I
no longer
really-
justify your actions. Yeah.
I enjoy I like puzzle solving and stuff like that. So I do really enjoy when they're like trying to figure out like what can we do to break through their defenses, and how can we like change our weaponry to get around how they adapt to everything and assimilate everything. I really do like that aspect of it, where they're figuring out how to deal with them. But
Yeah, I would agree with both of those things, and really kind of your overall point of where it's like they're really, really, really interesting to start, and then you're like, oh, they're Jesus now.
Right.
Okay, that's kind of I'm off board now.
The Voyager thing, where they had to build an even they built an even bigger nail with a board in it, like that sort of thing. They had species 8472 or whatever, and they're like, now these are Borg killers. I'm like, okay, fine. Like, had to add a Borg queen because otherwise this movie would have been boring. Like, okay, fine.
So, how do you feel about the slate of movies that are all based around the Next Generation? So we sort of touched on more than touched on the original set of movies, the original set. So how do you feel about the more TNG-centered films?
I think Generations is a fun movie with structural problems.
I
And
like
obviously,
Generations. I do have questions at the end of the day, like
Why and how dare
where,
you?
where is Kirk in all of this in the very end? Like, where did he like end up? Like, did they really? Where they were like, we're just gonna put some rocks on him, have a nice time, like bye. Like, I don't know.
And you just shatter his pitch. He's like, we gave Spock a
Right,
fucking movie funeral, and you put rocks on me in
literally-
Barstow, fucking California.
Put rocks on top of him and walked away from
Right.
it. And then they didn't even talk about it. I don't know. I have issues with that.
Yeah, you can feel it's a movie that was rewritten both on the fly and many times during pre-production. That they were like,
I liked Whoopi Goldberg.
I love Whoopi Goldberg.
She was great.
Whoopi Goldberg is so fantastic every time she appears in Star Trek. She is just
100%
an absolute
agree.
delight.
100% agree.
And just in such a crazy character. I love that they never really explain the character. Like,
I don't
Guinan,
want them to.
she's
She's
LR
just there
right
now.
Yeah, she's there.
She's
Like,
great.
like, where's she
She
from?
maybe is
She
like
is like
Q.
the Hotel California of Star Trek. Like, she's just always been here. We never talked about
Which
her.
is
and she's
literally-
never
An
leaving.
episode.
Which is funny that you meet her in a hotel in
Exactly.
California.
That's what's called a callback.
Mac, you have in your notes that something about a writer's strike and and Next Generation
Here's-
saves TV.
I love this as a sort of a footnote in television history, and also as the way sort of Next Generation saved itself. So in 1988, there is a writer's strike in California. So all shows grind to a halt immediately. There are no new. It happens in like July or August, so there are no new shows for September. Basically every new show that was past the pilot stage either gets immediately canceled or significantly retooled because they have to wait till November, December, January to finally put these on the air.
Right.
A lot of shows get canceled because they can't make their script order or because people forgot that they were on the air, so much later on it's like they collapse. And so pretty much everything that was a hit in 86, 87 doesn't make it to 89. Especially the shows that were now being produced in, Star Trek was being shown in syndication. So it wasn't on any of the major networks. It was on your local whatever station. And a lot of shows were being made for that now because Next Generation was pulling in more people than any show on any network. It was getting 30 million people a week, which is, if that was on now, it would be like watching the Super Bowl.
Right.
So every other show's been rushed into production. A lot of them moved to Canada so that they can sort of weasel around the restrictions, stuff like that. Such gems as Friday the 13th of the series.
We don't talk about that.
We will never talk about that. Trek still had a couple of scripts left over from Phase 2 that were written in 78, and there were some finagling rules where Roddenberry could rewrite these older scripts that were for Kirk and Spock for Picard and Data.
Okay.
So several of the episodes of this season and a couple in the later seasons are episodes that were meant for Star Trek Phase 2.
Okay.
So they are able to make their deadline faster than every other show on TV. So by the time the strike is over, they're on the air 3 weeks earlier than everybody else.
Wow.
So they're airing new stuff in late October. Everyone else is coming back in January. And this also allowed them some time to say, well, here's what's not working. And then they looked at a list of everything about this show. And season 3 is a much different television program than seasons 1 and 2 are. I think in conception and in cast, it's pretty much the same, but it has a different look. It's got different pacing, different music. It's just a very different overall show when it comes back in 1989, which I thought was, which as a kid, you understood that the Enterprise wasn't orange anymore, and now everything was sort of like slate gray and under fluorescence.
Sure.
It sort of looked more like a Hilton than it did before.
Okay.
But it's funny that there's this moment of, well, we had a couple of extra weeks to think about it, and none of this is working. And which is funny because they had a huge cast change in season 1. One actress asked to be removed from her contract, and another one was fired. And they were going to fire another one until they realized they wouldn't have any women left on the show. And so Marina Sirtis got her job saved for that. And it's just, there was all this shakeup for the first 2 years. And then season 3, it stabilizes. And I think it becomes the Next Generation everybody thinks of when they think of like Picard, Data, Jonathan Frakes beaming down somewhere and doing the Shatner of hitting the guy with both your hands at the same time.
Sure.
And the beard.
And the beard.
The beard.
Oh gosh, the beard. The beard.
That
The
is so
beard.
pivotal.
Yeah, the beard is a big thing. So, Jonathan Frakes is clean shaven as Commander Riker in the first season. And he comes back for season 2 for rehearsals, and he's grown a beard over the summer, and he thinks, okay, I'll shave this. And Gene Roddenberry apparently went, no, it looks nautical. And so they trimmed it, and they gave him a thinner beard and a more sculpted beard.
Sure.
And he kept it to this day. He's just known for that beard.
He pulls it off, to be fair.
Oh, he does. He does.
He looks
I had
real.
I had the real pleasure to meet him here in Nashville, one of the conventions a couple
He
of
was
years
very
back.
charming.
Oh, he is an incredibly charming and very tall man. I believe he is
so
6'7".
Yeah,
I'm 5 feet
he
tall.
looks very tall.
Yeah.
He was
on the
like
show.
towering over me.
Yeah.
And he quite appreciated that I liked his films that were not Star Trek related.
Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't get that a lot. No.
Yeah.
Well, Thunderbirds is fine. It's fun. But there's the idea of jumping the shark. where your show is bad now because of something that happened. The reverse is often called growing the beard, because when Riker got his beard, the show got better. And it did. In this season, there are a lot of really thoughtful, interesting episodes. Data becomes Sherlock Holmes for an episode for some reason.
Sure.
He's put
reasons.
He's
Because
put
they're
on
all
trial.
stage actors and they get bored, and so they put them on the holodeck and they let them do whatever they want.
That's a great of the week episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a brilliant holodeck episode.
Yeah.
And the holodeck was a great concept of we can go anywhere.
Yeah.
So if we ever want to do Shakespeare or A Christmas Carol for an episode, we can totally do that.
I did.
What do they do?
I did take your recommendation, and after those first couple episodes, skip to I forget
The Big Goodbye.
Yes, that is it. And I'm glad I watched it. I knew that I was only going to be able to catch a few episodes in between you recommending stuff and then actually recording this episode. So I definitely picked wisely and going off of your recommendations, and I'm glad I watched it because it was worth it. I was like, this is fun.
It's the only episode to ever win a Peabody.
Huh.
I mean, they
Interesting.
They did
Yeah,
that one
a
really
great
knocked it
And
out
I
of the
feel like
park.
that's a good episode to watch if you haven't really watched a lot of Star Trek, or like it stands on its own. Like, you don't have to do homework.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of what I appreciated
Yeah.
about it, because when you said the name and I kind of looked for it on Netflix and noticed that it was like episode 10 or 11.
Yeah.
So I was skipping ahead significantly, and each episode is an hour
Right.
long. So I was like, okay, this must mean something significant if Max says that I can skip from episode 2 to episode 10 and there not be a problem. And I was watching, I was like, doesn't seem like I missed anything.
You
So-
did not.
I mean, and I don't mean that as a slight. You might take that as like, yeah, you definitely didn't miss anything. But yeah, I don't mean anything by that where, negative wise.
All three Trek fans here can tell you most Trek episodes are bad.
It's really
Yeah,
my theory is
I
that
mean-
it's really hard to watch 3 episodes of The Next Generation in a row that are good.
Sure.
If you're watching chronologically, it's really hard to have a stretch of 3 episodes in a row that are just bangers.
Right, but that's part of the appeal and
Yeah.
charm, right? Is that
I think a
we
lot of
embrace the
sci-fi-
bad with the good.
You kind of have to be a Star Trek fan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think Star Trek in particular has that problem, but in general, I think a lot of sci-fi does, where it's just like, when it's good, it's amazing, and when it's bad, it's like, we don't talk about that.
Hey, remember that episode where Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beam down, and there's this one lady, and there's a completely black background because they couldn't afford
Couldn't
a.
afford a set? Yes, I
Yeah.
do. Desi actually got that set in the divorce settlement. So that's
Do we want to move on to Deep Space Nine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Tiffany says yes.
I will say, so when I watched all of these shows in syndication as I was growing up, and I would have said then that Next Generation was my favorite. And then when I was in my 20s and everything went on Netflix, I watched through all of them again.
Right.
And from the original series all the way through Voyager. And it's funny because after watching them again as an adult, Deep Space Nine became hands down my favorite, by far, no contest. And I liked Voyager a lot less than I did when I watched it as a teenager. For some reason, I was obsessed with that when I was a teenager, and now I kind of look back on that and cringe. But I don't know, Deep Space Nine, it's one of the first times that I can think of a show that was so serialized, where you couldn't wait for the next episode, and especially towards the end, it just kept you coming back for more over and over again, because you were I have to know what's going to happen with these people, because everything was more of a deep dive. But you do kind of have to pay more attention in Deep Space Nine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep that in
Oh, yeah.
mind when I dive into it.
Sort of the way I sort of fell in love with the characters on Deep Space Nine immediately. The first season is kind of shaky. It's got some weird we had these scripts left over. Here's a Q episode, I guess. They
But
sort
the
of.
beard rule also applies to Deep Space
Yes, it
Nine.
does.
Okay.
Because season 3, right?
Yeah, season 3.
Season 3, Cisco shows back up and he's got a beard and he shaved his head and now he's a badass.
I don't know why, Cisco, the
yes, this is before the thong song.
yes, the thong song vocalist.
Let me see that thong. That thong, the thong, thong, thong.
Also,
In
Avery
between-
Brooks is a full blown like crazy person.
In between his band Drew Hill and his solo career, Cisco found the time to be a Star Trek.
I believe that's
He was
Big
great.
Will, Drew Hill, that wild wiki wild.
You know about it. Mac and I are gonna be friends.
It's interesting. Like, so DS9 runs weirdly. That Next Generation's already on the air. They go, well, we have a license to print money. Let's have another Star Trek show. And Gene Roddenberry dies while they're making it. Like, while they're trying to put the pilot together, Gene Roddenberry dies. And they go, well, can we still make this? And the guys making it go, yeah, we're not even going to, we're not going to take any of his weird notes that he gave
Kind of
while he was
becomes like
dying.
the stepchild of
Yeah.
Star Trek. I don't think it got its due in its time.
Because it never runs by itself. Because it's running when Next Generation it's running while Next Generation's in its last couple of seasons, and then Voyager comes on the air almost immediately because UPN starts, and they're like, we need a flagship show for this new stupid awful network we have.
Network,
Like this weird extra network you have now.
That is pretty accurate description of UPN.
We've got The Watcher starring Sir Mix-a-Lot. No, we need something else. What about Marker
good.
starring Richard Grieco?
Still better than that.
Didn't fucking Seventh Heaven come on UPN?
It might have been the WB.
Sounds right. No, yeah. I think
Yeah, I think that was the
right. I think
WB.
it's the WB.
Okay.
I believe tonight on the WB, an all new Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
WB has always, and now it's the CW. I think, right?
The two of them merged. Yeah,
it's always been that like angst.
Yeah, it's
Right.
teen angst. Yeah,
Teen angst channel.
Yeah, and so Voyager was needed to be like this, like
The teen angst.
Yeah,
Star
the
Trek.
teen angst. A man, it gets there close. But so DS9 is airing, and it's airing progressively more complex and weird stuff. I think because they know people aren't really paying attention. Like that Paramount is like, hey, look, Voyager, it's on our new network. We have to make it succeed, and we have to put all of our energy there. And they go, all right, so somebody did a genocide at Earth, and now there's going to be a long war. And they're like, everyone's like, wait, what? Yeah,
They were just kind of doing whatever they wanted because nobody was watching
This
this.
seems pretty heavy for like a 48-minute television
yeah,
program
basically.
about space.
Which is why you had to keep watching it because
There's-
it expanded so much.
My favorite Trek anything. There's an episode in the 7th and final season called "It's Only a Paper Moon," which is about there's been this horrible war, and one of the characters comes back, and he's lost a leg, and he's saying like, everybody I know was killed, but I'm still here, and it's basically there's no B plot, there's no other thing. It's just this guy in a room for 48 minutes explaining how terrible he feels, and then he has a complete nervous breakdown.
It's
after that.
basically Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo,
Yes.
but with space.
But with space. Yeah, it really is because of the hallucinations, and
Yeah.
they built it the exact same.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You're fucking with a professional here, Max. I don't know if you know that.
That is really well done. And you probably found out about it not from the Metallica video.
No, I didn't actually.
No, I knew you were well read, but no, but you're right. You're absolutely right.
I am not well read, and now you probably have a better idea as to why I get made fun of on an episodic basis.
Quick side note: Johnny Got His Gun. It's a story about a soldier on the last day of World War I, and he's hit by a shell, and he loses his arms, his legs, his mouth, and his eyes and ears.
Yeah.
And he's then put in a bed, and he hallucinates his life and what could have happened and what did happen, and then he meets Jesus Christ, and then he tries to bang out with his head in Morse code that he'd like to be murdered.
Yeah. It's a
End of
very,
book.
very heavy thing.
What's this called again?
It's called.
Johnny Got His Gun.
Okay.
There are two very good film adaptations of it as well. One of which became the Metallica 1 video. They
Sure.
cut it into that.
Yeah.
And I believe the better of the film adaptations is actually available on YouTube for free. I'm pretty
Yes.
sure it's in...
The Ben McKenzie one.
Yeah,
was
yeah,
the
yeah.
most recent. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's gone into like...
He specifically
public
made it as
use.
an educational piece. Yeah.
So I don't. There's no like copyright
Yeah.
involved in it, but it's if you just want to like see a movie and be like, wow, I kind of want to blow my fucking brains out.
Yeah.
That's the one to do it.
Well, this
All
Star
right.
Trek episode is not that heavy, but it is heavy.
Not quite, but
No, it was interesting that, in a lot of ways, Next Generation goes there once with Captain Picard. There is one fantastic episode where he goes back to his family in France and explains what's happened to him, and it's a very difficult episode to watch. But DS9 was allowed to go there more often, I think, just because there was this ongoing war, and they kept having all these side characters who could explain it to you. Like here's
Right.
the captain's girlfriend is a charter pilot who actively shepherds terrorists across enemy lines. You know,
he doesn't know.
Yeah, and he has zero idea. You know, his dad is a chef in New Orleans on Earth when Earth gets attacked. So here's a frontline experience of that, and I love it as a side project, sort of as a side project to Next Generation, where you have here is the ideal. You want to be exploring space, and you want to be your best person. Mm-hmm. And that is what Next Generation gave to me. It gave me the ideals that I would love to live by and the people I would love to be. And then DS9 reminds you of what you have to do to get there. And sometimes it's messy and terrible and awful. And sometimes you murder a guy in cold blood on screen and you're still first billed in the cast.
All right.
Yeah.
And we get to see so many different characters experiencing those things and living their lives and like figuring out who they are as people. And especially because that episode involves Nog, who starts out as just almost a little throwaway character, you know.
He's a little rascal almost. You're like, oh, I'm a pickpocket. And then 7 seasons, like, I lost my leg and all my friends are dead.
Yeah.
Would you recommend diving into Deep Space Nine after, for me personally, like after watching Next Generation? Like,
it syncs up on several episodes, starting in like season 6 of Next Generation. And that Picard and Data both show up. There's a bunch of stuff.
There's a little crossover.
Yeah.
Okay.
That the crux of why these characters exist on Deep Space Nine has to do with a 3rd season episode of Next Generation. That they don't exist without each other. They explain a little bit of it in case you're coming in and just watching Deep Space Nine, but it really does play off. And that's what I love, that it's got this mirror up to Next Generation to be like, you can love your ideals and you can love this, this perfect world that you think you have, but something is always behind it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right on. Good to know.
Deep Space Nine itself wasn't originally Deep Space Nine. It was an enemy space station, basically. And now they have taken over it and they are turning it into this Federation outpost. And it's a different story. And some people do call it the space soap opera. And some people do say, oh, it's not as Star Trek because they're not trekking places, but they are. They are, centered in this space station, but they have ships and they go other places.
They literally get the armored Winnebago from Stripes and take it to murder a bunch of people.
And literally, there's nothing about that sentence that you should dislike.
And then that ship is also Worf's bedroom later on. So
Oh yeah, Worf shows up on it. Worf becomes a main character.
Getting the shit kicked out of him.
Starting from episode 1, where he's like, "You're a lady. I'm going to hit you in the face," and she's like, "Stab."
Yeah.
And then he gets to go be a weird sourpuss all over the galaxy. And
like I said, I love Worf. I have a soft spot for him.
Yeah.
But my God, in terms of just being delusional, there are few characters that top him.
But we get to know so much more about him, I feel like, as a person on Deep Space Nine than we ever did on The Next Generation.
You find out how many people hate him across the galaxy, and it's several.
It's a lot of love and hate.
It's a lot.
One of them I love that so when the action figures came out, and this, huge, I'm 10 and this is the biggest thing that ever happened.
Right.
And so it's the bridge crew of Next Generation, and then it's the guy who hates Worf the most. It's Gowron, son of, I think it's one of the Klingons who's just like, Worf, you are constantly foiling my plans. Like that's and so he's like the
giant
one
eyeballs.
He's the one bad guy you got. He's the one who they
Yeah, we'll have to circle back to villains in the big picture because Klingons are the fucking jam, right?
Yes, they are. Hell yes.
We'll come. David, write that down in your notey notes. We'll come back to
notes.
Sure. Okay. Writing it down in my notey notes.
Who's your favorite Deep Space Nine character?
Oh, you know what? Across all parts of the universe, in all galaxies, you know how annoying I am about my Celticness. So Miles Edward O'Brien, Chief Petty Officer, is absolutely my favorite character in all of Star Trek.
That's fair. Jadzia Dax, hands down my favorite. She
Dax is the best.
has a weird worm inside of her that is her symbiote. And
not a euphemism.
That worm has lived in many other people and has been passed on. And so she carries with her the memories and weird thoughts of all these other people, and it's very complex.
Yeah. DS9 was weird.
I love that
I'm getting that.
They play that for such hippie nonsense for seasons. They're like, oh, the statesman and the scholar, and eventually, oh yeah, and the serial killer.
Yeah,
remember when your worm was a serial killer and murdered 25 people?
And she gets to meet up with people who knew the symbiote, as other people, basically. So she sort of knows these people from previous lives, sort of, if you will. And
There's
it's just a cool way to play off of the character.
Another Klingons are the fucking jam moment where... So the Klingon bad guys from the original series all come back on Deep Space Nine, and they now have the crazy makeup with the forehead ridges and everything. So it's all these like actors in their 70s and 80s coming to just be fucking awesome on TV for a little bit. And I've seen this meme going around of like how to easily, if someone tells you their name or like pronouns or whatever, here's how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And they all knew Jadzia Dax as Curzon Dax in her previous incarnation. And
As
they
a
go,
man.
Yeah, and they go, Curzon, my old friend. I'm Jadzia now. Jadzia, my old friend. And then it's never spoken of again.
If they
That's
can
funny.
accept
I
that.
fucking love Klingons.
We have a Batleth. It's, I mean,
Yeah.
we had it at our way.
We had a bat left our way.
Respect.
And why
That was a
wouldn't you?
stipulation that I had.
Because we didn't have to have a Klingon bachelor party, which turns out is being dehydrated in the woods for 5 days.
I mean, you guys did have your wedding at the Adventure Science Center.
In the planetarium.
So, I mean...
We used the overture from Star Trek: The Motion Picture as our entrance music.
And
Yes.
I walked down the aisle to the Deep Space Nine theme song. As
Okay,
it's a
so-
beautiful orchestral score.
You know when they say you should always stop a story one line sooner? That was a good example.
We haven't gotten to that line yet.
It is a beautiful orchestral score, all right?
Anyway, Voyager.
Yes,
love-
that is what's next.
This is maybe my favorite note we've ever had on the show. It's like Battlestar Galactica, but boring. Because, goddamn, that's true.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
So basic premise for David of I almost said Battlestar Galactica. So
No, you know what? Let's just talk about
Let's just
Battlestar
talk about
Galactica
Battlestar
for 10 minutes because
I
it's
could
better.
not stop watching that show. I'll tell you
Voyager
what.
is like, so this ship disappeared. We're going to follow them. Oh no, we disappeared too. Now we're on the other side of the galaxy. We got to find a way to go home. There's a way to go home. Our psychotic captain blew it up. Anyway, now we're going to go traverse the cosmos for 7 years.
Fascist.
That's the pilot. Also, I love it. So there we mentioned Lieutenant Tom Paris earlier. Tom Paris, when we meet him,
Such a fuckboy.
is in prison
He's such a fuckboy.
for
He's like the
murdering
OG
a man.
fuckboy.
Like the convicted murderer, Tom Paris, and they're like, "You're the only one who can fly the ship." Why? It's a science vessel in Starfleet. Literally anyone can do that. You just like hit the buttons like this.
Yeah, but his
Right.
daddy is somebody. I don't even remember.
His daddy was on Seinfeld, and I'm trying to remember who he played. Oh gosh, he's one of Elaine's bosses, and I can't remember which one.
I don't know.
It's gonna bother me so much. It's not JP.
But 14-year-old me thought that he was like the jammy jam.
So basically, you have this. So there's this thing called the Maquis, and the Maquis don't like that. The Federation has redrawn the settlement lines, so now some things are in enemy territory, so they have to move. And they're like, not in my backyard, so they shoot people. And so one of their ships got lost, and then they got lost in the same place as the Voyager. And now Voyager and this Maquis ship, they're going to be on the same ship together.
They
Is
gotta
this
work
gonna-
together.
Yeah. Is this going to cause conflict? No.
Like three times, maybe.
No, because that will require competent writing.
Is-
I don't necessarily blame like the actors involved in Voyager for the things that they had to do.
Is there
make
conflict?
money.
No. Is there a Puerto Rican guy playing a Native American with a face tattoo? Yes.
Well,
It is, in fact, deep asleep, to use the parlance of our
Yeah.
time.
It is the anti-woke.
Yeah.
It's set
It's-
relations with everyone
It
back
is
30
hashtag
years.
problematic.
yeah, it sure as fuck sounds like it.
My favorite character on Voyager, hands down, is the holographic Doctor.
Oh yeah, the idea is that when they got sucked into the wormhole or whatever, it's called the Badlands. They get hit by lightning and the flux capacitor goes haywire and then goes so far into the past or whatever. I don't
Went way
care.
over 88 miles per hour.
Anyway, the Doctor, who didn't like Tom Paris because Tom Paris murdered a guy, was killed in
To
the
be
blood.
fair, seems like a
Seems
legitimate
like a
beef.
legitimate beef, yeah. It's so the Doctor dies and the first officer dies and the pilot dies. So now they're like, well, we need to get more people, but they don't have another Doctor, so they get a hologram. And there's like an emergency hologram that's supposed to be there for like a day, but now he has to be on all the time.
and
and
he's
it's-
not happy about it.
And it's Robert Picardo. You might remember him from like every Joe Dante film. He's great in Inner Space. He's great in like everything. So
He's amazing.
elevates this material beyond anything he gets.
deserves, yeah.
Remember the episode where he goes to the planet where they didn't have music before, and then he sings and he becomes the biggest star in the history of that planet?
No, because I have expunged all of this from my memory.
What about the episode where there's one where he has to fight like Beowulf?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Where there's a Beowulf program on the holodeck. Or what do they call it? Something else there later. It's like a holoshed or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's
They
taken
didn't
over
even
the.
deserve to call it the right thing.
Yeah, it's like it takes over the ship because the ship is somewhat organic. Holosuite.
Well, no, that's Deep Space Nine.
It's,
I don't know.
Anyway,
It doesn't
fucking
matter.
Beowulf takes over the ship and he has to
Yeah.
go in there and fight Grendel.
And that sounds awesome, right? But they found a way to make it not that.
Super boring.
Well, that's a shame because like
concept.
I remember reading Grendel, like we read it in high school, and I was like, why are they allowing us to read this? like it is
It's insane.
like 5
Really
pages in, and
graphic.
like this creature fuck is like masturbating, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? I'm going to Catholic school.
If you had
Why
told
am I
me-
reading this
If you had
book?
told me that was written in like 1984 during a Coke binge, I would have believed you. But somehow in like 900 AD, the Vikings were like, yo, hold up, but hear me out. He's gonna cut this dude's face off, and then masturbate furiously. Oh, fuck.
It's my
That
fault
would be
we're
the
talking
last-
about this right now.
The last Nicolas Cage, John Woo slander that I stand for, sir.
I actually ran that quote through my head just randomly. Like I was walking Harvey the other night, and I was like, just randomly, like, I took his face off.
I mean, I say it all the time.
I love that movie. I really
Also, I'd
do.
like to note for the people that are not here, which is pretty much everyone except the four of us, that like
Literally
in you,
everyone except the four of us.
yes, like I just said, Ted. As they did that, they did the
have
the
to.
hand motion
have to do the
in
hand
unison.
It's the
and I
rules.
felt and I felt like
This is the way.
I was like
Being
watching
initiated
chocolate being
into something.
invented. It was really great and really fun.
That
Anyways,
was a fun tangent.
yes,
Moving back to shit.
right.
Yeah,
Yes,
we gotta
circling
still
back
talk about
around
Voyager
to our
still,
topic
don't we?
tonight.
I don't want to dunk on Voyager too hard because it does have occasional flashes of real brilliance.
No,
There's-
it doesn't. Moving on to Enterprise.
When it is bad, it is heinous.
It is heinous. It's worse than any other show when it's bad.
It's heinous when it's bad. It does have its moments.
Yes, like the
I'm-
last episode
I-
ending.
Oh no, they even managed to botch that.
Yeah,
I
Ow.
will never forgive them for their finale. Like, can we get no satisfaction? Like, I just needed maybe 10 more minutes of them, like,
It was so weird that they all
Doing
ended up at
anything.
Tony Stark's funeral. Like, it was the weirdest ending to that
Yeah, it
show.
was just kind of a weird thing. I don't know.
Who was that kid?
was that kid?
It's kind of complicated, actually.
So, yeah, what's after Voyager?
Enterprise.
I didn't watch Enterprise. Sorry.
Enterprise is the cynical Star Trek.
I heard there was a dog, though, so now I kind of want to watch it.
There is Porthos the Beagle. He
heard
belongs to the
this.
captain and lives in the captain's ready room. So whenever they need to have a comic relief bit, they're like, "Hey, a
There's a
dog."
beagle.
If
Yeah.
I would have known, maybe I would have watched it, but nobody told me. so.
Enterprise is really strange because it debuted directly after 9/11, and it has all the problems of both early 2000s storytelling on TV and of sort of Hollywood grasping for meaning at the beginning of the Forever War. And
Yeah.
it really ham-fistedly tried to put in a 9/11 allegory by having their monster of the week nuke Florida.
Which weirdly was an improvement. I had a lot of complicated feelings about it, to be honest.
It really is strange that this first season has no reason to exist, because there's this pull in Star Trek where every time it ends up on the corporate level they say, well, we need to have more people like Star Trek, and I say, why? You already have 20 million people who will tune in.
Super dedicated.
Yeah,
Right.
who will tune into your shit all the time. Picard is the best debut in like 90 of the territories that it debuted in this week. It's insane. Like, everyone will come out for a good Star Trek. But the
Right.
corporate are always like, how do we get casual fans in? You fucking don't. They already know what Star Trek is. And
Right.
They're
Enterprise...
either going to watch it or they're not.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's weird. It's like Star Trek is basically a part of the culture as a whole now. Like
Yeah.
it's survived the zeitgeist that it debuted in, and like that TNG debuted in, and it's just like it's a cornerstone of entertainment culture at this point. Like
Yeah.
no, there are no casual people left that don't know what Star Trek is.
right.
Warp drive. Beam me up, Scotty. Talking like this. in
Like,
any
These
location.
are like bedrock memes
Yeah.
at this
Yeah.
point. Like,
Yeah.
there's nobody out there in a developed country that like doesn't know what Star Trek is.
And that they're the things that predate Dawkins's ideas of memetics
Yeah,
in his
yeah.
book. So they were there to form his ideas. If you have memes, you have Star Trek,
Yeah.
and vice versa. And it's
At least
so
in some abstract sense. Like, everybody knows what Star Trek is.
Right.
Right. So if you're gonna watch it, you're gonna watch it, and if you're not, you're not. Which is why the fact that they had a weird pop hit from the soundtrack of Patch Adams, that's actually where the theme song is from, and they removed the word Star Trek from the title, so it was just Enterprise. And there's one callback to Star Trek: First Contact, the Next Generation film. They bring back James Cromwell to do one scene, so they can be like, "Look, we know what a Star Trek is," and then it has nothing else to do, even though it takes place 200 years before all of this.
Even though we
And
didn't talk about it, I just want to say that I really like First Contact, even though a lot of people don't.
It's a totally fine action film.
Yeah.
It's got
I really
a lot
like
of
it.
weird small problems that start to add up where you're like, well, why did that happen? Well, why are you going that way?
I
Why
just
are
love
you,
Zefram Cochrane so much.
The inventor of warp drive is a fantastic character. Plus, he's the guy from Babe. You love James Cromwell.
Sure.
He didn't even
True.
really want to do it.
Yeah.
They wanted Tom Hanks for that film.
Oh.
He was like, I'm Tom fucking Hanks. I'm not doing Star Trek.
He said yes and had to drop out.
That's the universe I
That would
want
have
to
been a
live
way
in.
better. Well, not way better. I don't know.
would've
It
been
would
a
have been a way
different
different movie.
But could you imagine the sudden lines of people going to see a Star Trek movie just because Tom Hanks is in it?
Yeah.
Like, that would have been a weird...
His Q rating is fucking ridiculous.
He very rarely makes even a, like, okay film. I mean, he makes
Right.
just phenomenal movies all the time. So he was making That Thing You Do at the same time, so he had to drop out. A movie that I really adore.
I like it too. It's a fun movie. It just
Yeah.
makes you feel
I
good.
took
Yeah,
a soft
yeah, exactly. It's a total piece of wonderful slice of pop, which Enterprise is not.
No, it's basically the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's what's crazy is it's a show that does not find its footing until the 4th season.
Yeah.
When it finally realizes it has a reason to exist, and it goes, "Oh, we can show the forming of the Federation."
And we're done now, thanks.
Yeah, and then they bow out with the single dumbest hour of TV that's ever been created.
Oh, no.
These
I
are
want to argue that, but
but you
I'm
can't.
finding myself unable to.
I am spoilers for a show you're not going to watch.
And we encourage you
I
to
might
not
want to watch it. I don't know.
So the last episode
ears.
of Enterprise, they've already solved the main thing of season 4. They stopped RoboCop from doing whatever he was going to do. Stuff happened. It's crazy. There's more than one bad Star Trek thing where I can be like, they stopped RoboCop from doing the thing he was going to do. The end. So then they show like more stuff that happened in their lives, and then suddenly Commander Riker is there. And it turns out that he's been watching a holoprogram of the Enterprise so that he can learn about moral dilemmas that are happening during a season 6 episode of Next Generation.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
They St. Elsewhere it.
Yeah, they totally put him in.
no.
Oh,
They put him in the snow globe.
Yeah,
Snow
they
globe.
St.
It's-
Elsewhere it.
It's
Oh my
and
God.
it's for the episode
That's
The
so
Pegasus,
cheap.
where he's trying to figure out whether he's going to betray his captain, who's about to murder everyone on the Enterprise, and the answer was always yes. And then Frakes and Marina Sirtis show up, and they're like, "It's 1993," and we're like, "It's fucking not."
And I kind of hate you now.
And I kind of hate both of you now. The worst is when they have Data show up, by which they mean they have him call over the intercom because Brett can't show up because he's not gonna look right. But it's really
what a
bad.
bummer.
They just zoom through the next well, what happened over the next 20 years? Well, I'm glad you asked. Advanced to time code, like fuck you, TV show. And then everybody says that these are the voyages at the end. They have all the captains say except for Cisco because
Because they
he's
forgot
not
that he
allowed. Yeah.
existed.
So yeah, Enterprise is a miserable slog except for Jeffrey Combs, and I can often
Oh, I do
say
love Jeffrey
except for Jeffrey
Combs.
Combs on a lot of TV shows, and especially on Star Trek, because he has played, I think he played 14 different characters between Next Generation,
He's
DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise.
One of my favorite things also about Deep Space Nine also, and there's one episode, isn't there an episode where he plays 3 different characters?
He
Or
plays
2?
him. He plays himself dead and alive in the same shot, which is amazing.
That is pretty good.
Yeah.
Plus,
Amazing.
he was fucking Reanimator. Show some respect to Herbert
He's
West. He's the best.
amazing.
Yeah.
He's so good.
But yeah, he plays the only tolerable character. And another thing, going back to that idea of all of these people on Star Trek, the actors are cast impeccably because they're great actors who can do whatever.
Yeah.
You also know what every character is about immediately. You know, in the first 40 minutes of the pilot of Next Generation, you know what everyone's about. You're already in on these characters. You have your favorites. You're ready to see them. Whatever. I didn't know who anybody was on Enterprise until like
That
season
was my
3.
problem. I did actually watch 3 episodes of Enterprise, and I might not have been paying the best attention, but I felt like I wasn't sure who the people were or why I was supposed to care about them, and I kind of was just bored with it, and then I just watched Deep Space Nine again. But I don't know, it didn't connect with me right away, so I just kind of forgot about it, but
Sure.
maybe I'll go back to
And
it
I think it's
someday.
the same problem of having now that we've got CBS All Access for Picard, because I wasn't going to miss any. This had to come into my eyeballs immediately after it appeared online.
Right.
It's allowed me to watch some of Discovery now, and I'm having the same trouble as I get into it. Is that I don't know who these characters are or why I should be following these characters specifically, and that's a real problem. That Trek was always very good at telling you, here's who these people are. Here's why you like them. Here's why we can give you choices to like them. Yeah, Janeway's a fascist, but here's her redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
She likes coffee.
Just kidding.
End of list.
Coffee in that nebula.
She likes coffee. End of list.
Have you
She has a
gotten
husband,
the
maybe.
Have you gotten the idea from Picard that there's going to be a lot of you're gonna have to have a lot of precursor knowledge of previous
think
Star
so.
Trek iterations
No.
to understand
They
what's
kinda
going on?
give
I
it
mean,
to you
I know
with a
that
little bow
there's
on
only
it.
one episode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is
as of this recording.
Yeah.
They introduced a new character, and she comes in and has a great rapport with Picard. They're like, all right, so here are 2 people who are classically trained. Here are stage actors who are able to show up and give you like exposition in a way that you're actually going to want to pay attention and be like, okay, what next?
Right.
And then she drops in. She's like, oh, my former partner who's now gone, name of super important character from the series. And so everybody who knows Next Generation really well, who remembers, there's an episode called Measure of a Man, which is about Data being on trial to prove that he is a person, to prove that he's a sentient being and not
Great
just
episode.
Oh, fantastic.
episode.
But they throw in the prosecution was Dr. Bruce Maddox, and they're just like, oh yeah, my old partner Bruce Maddox, and they're just like, and now here's what Maddox has been doing for the last 30 years, and I'm like, we saw that guy once, and then heard him once, and he's been gone from the series since then, as a name drop for people who know the series, fantastic. But for a new viewer, that's okay. This guy disappeared. What's his deal? Who's this guy? This is a new mystery. I want to go with you on this journey because I like these people. I like Alison Pill as an actress. I like the characters. So.
Even as people who know a lot about Star Trek, I feel like there's a lot of things that have happened between the last time we were in this timeline and this.
Right.
Yeah.
And they pretty much give it to you, like they're catching everybody up to speed. So I feel like even if you don't know other stuff about the show, they fill in enough blanks for you that you can get through it and understand what's happening.
Okay.
But it was really good. We both really liked it.
Right on.
I
Yeah,
really like
I've aside from what you guys posted on social media and told me
Yeah.
over Messenger, I've heard a lot of other good things.
And there's a dog, so.
Picard has a pit bull terrier, so
Excellent.
name number 1. I'm like, all right, I'm
Love
in.
it.
Fully in on this.
Amazing.
Do you want to move into the JJ films?
I'm gonna say this-
one part of this episode, other than the Next Generation, sort of that I can kind of
I'm
contribute to.
Gonna jump ahead. I really liked Star Trek Beyond, and that's the nice thing I can say.
Is that
here.
the one I haven't seen
Yeah.
yet? Okay.
Did you just recently watch it? For some reason, I thought
No,
I heard.
I haven't watched it.
Okay, so it was you that.
And it
I
was on like FXM or something a couple of days ago, so I watched it again when
Okay.
I was doing
I
laundry.
tried to rewatch it because the only time I've seen it was in theaters right when it came out.
That's the one that James Wan did.
Yeah.
Right, not
Yeah.
JJ, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you
That's
could
why
tell.
it's a competent film.
Yes, that's why it was.
I
It
need
was
to
not.
watch it.
There was no mystery about it. There
It
was just
felt
a film.
yeah. So prior to seeing the 2 J.J. Abrams movies and this one, I at that point in time I think I saw 1 or 2 episodes of the original series, and that was pretty much it. And from just from those viewings, I got the feeling that 3 was kind of meant to have this feel of episodicness, for lack of better words. Like it felt more self-contained and more of like an extended episode of Star
Yeah.
Trek rather than this big epic Mac,
Summer
as you
blockbuster.
as you put in your notes, boom bang explosions.
I mean, look, there's the fact that Into Darkness ends with Spock running at like 50 miles an hour. He's doing the full-on Dwight past the signs,
Sure.
and he like punching Benedict Cumberbatch in the face. First of all, the fact that Khan Noonien Singh is a Sikh. You cannot have Benedict Cumberbatch play him End of list.
So here's my thing.
It's-
For me, I'm never gonna be that person. I don't want to be that person who says something isn't Star Trek, because I don't want to tell people what Star Trek can be to them, or what it shouldn't be, or what it should be. You know, if somebody likes those movies and they stand on their own and they don't have to care about anything that happened before it. But I just felt like I was so invested in like the original timeline of Star Trek that when they start rewriting characters that we already know and love and kind of start going back over things and rewriting over plots, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm just like, wait, like why do we have to rehash this? Can we not just like go forward in the future of Star Trek, or can we not just like even remake something that happened but not make it so
just update
different?
it.
Yeah, just update it, you know, because I do understand the concept of like, okay, the original series kind of looked like trash with cardboard and flickering lights. If you want to make it pretty, that's cool, but I don't know, it just felt weirdly to me like fan service and patronization at the same time. Like I felt patronized. I went to go see it at midnight on the premiere night.
Is there an overwhelming majority of hardcore Trekkies that all kind of just shit on these movies?
No.
Maybe not an overwhelming majority, but I feel like there's definitely people who will say like this isn't Star Trek or whatever. But like, you know, I mean, it can be Star Trek to somebody. Like if you haven't seen the original series and you go see these movies and you like it, cool, that's your Star Trek.
That's kind of what I got out of it, because like I said, this was my very first exposure to Star Trek. Like I said towards the beginning of the episode, I didn't grow up with it, so I didn't have this.
Like the Wrath of Khan just meant so much to me already.
Right,
like,
yeah.
Seeing this other kind of weird, different version of it, like just felt weird to me.
Yeah, it's almost like Star Trek for people who were never into Star Trek.
Yeah. And J.J. Abrams admitted he didn't really like Star Trek. Yeah. And then he just was like, all right, so what do people remember? Oh, that guy went Khan. What if the other guy went Khan?
Yeah, and like
right.
the whole thing, what really soured me on it, because I saw the first movie and I was like, okay, I mean, it's fun. It's not like
Simon Pegg's a great Scotty.
Yes.
Carl Urban's
Simon
a lot
Pegg's
of fun as
great.
Sulu.
Yeah. He's my favorite.
Carl Urban's great as Bones.
Yeah.
Carl Urban is great as everything.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, well,
That
yes.
is a very
Okay.
good point.
There were
Dread.
things that I liked
Yes.
about it.
Thank you.
Fucking love Dread.
Love Dread, dude. That shit is like crack to me. Anyway, back to something that's not nearly as good as Dread. It just, I don't know, it doesn't fully work. The alternate universe thing is just kind of like boring to me.
Yeah, because now it's what you remember, but slightly different. And they keep throwing in weird things like, hey, look, a Tribble. This guy's named Riley. Remember Christine's Chapel?
This?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like,
Spock's here.
Spock's here now. Other Spock is here.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. What really soured me on it, though, beyond that, was the fact that they're like, I'm definitely not making Wrath of Khan super serial.
Yeah.
JK, guys, I made Wrath of Khan.
I can fix that movie in like one sentence. That's not Khan. It's just an augment who's found out that Khan is dead and is going to go apeshit on the world because he's a religious zealot. The end. Did it.
Yeah.
You know, you just make Benedict Cumberbatch some other guy, and he's a terrorist and a religious zealot.
Yeah.
The end.
Eric Bana was a much better villain in the first film.
Oh, and what's great about Picard is that they strengthen his character as a villain, and they fully explain the backstory of his character in like 2 seconds right at the start. They're like, all right, so there was this supernova. Oh, okay, here's what Romulans are. Here's how Eric Bana's character fits in.
Yeah.
And he was so good in that movie.
Yeah, in prep for this episode, I went back and rewatched these two movies. Like I said, I unfortunately didn't get a chance to revisit Beyond, but I did with the first two, and with the alternate timeline stuff, I don't really have much to say on that because
You don't know the
Yeah, it's
original
not
timeline.
it's not your thing.
right. So,
And so that's a cool perspective to hear, though, you know, from somebody who doesn't.
yeah, so for me, it didn't bother me because
Yeah.
I don't have anything to bounce it off of, to base it off of. So, yeah, it didn't, but I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Like, it made sense to me that, you know, hey, here's a Spock from either the future past or an alternate timeline or something. It made sense to me in some
And
weird way.
you allowed to
It
have,
stands on its own. And
But like what you guys were just saying about the first one, I will definitely agree. The first one was a lot more fun to watch. The second one was like it's a good movie, like visually appealing, but it's kind of like it feels a little messy and all over the place, and it also is for as much like boom bang explosions that's going on, not a whole lot I feel like is going on. Like it's kind of dull a little bit, which is kind of sad to say because like Chris Pine is in it, Benedict Cumberbatch is in it.
These are good actors who are really giving their all and nothing for it.
I had a big problem with my biggest question from that movie was like, why did they have to have him when they had all of the other people who also, you know, supposedly had the same abilities or whatever as him? Like, wouldn't they all have the same blood? Like, I don't know.
They need him. They need augment blood to save.
I felt like
Kirk.
that was a
We'll get
weird
one of the
plot
other
hole where I
assholes.
didn't understand why they specifically needed him when they had a whole cargo bay full of dudes just like him, frozen or whatever.
I'm gonna drop
poor writing.
poor writing. I'm gonna drop in a really ridiculous
Myers
horror
wasn't
movie
there.
Easter egg here.
Okay.
So they capture Khan. They put him in that weird like plexiglass jail because hey, that was what it looked like at that point. That's what 2013 looked like. There's a crazy alien with a huge huge prosthetic on. You know, you've got like one of those like frog aliens or whatever. Underneath that is Heather Langenkamp, Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street 1, 3, and 7.
That's amazing.
Because that's her design crew.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, her and her husband. So the story goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And, I don't know. I'm such a huge fan of New Nightmare and the bit where the Freddy hand comes with anyone. And
Sure.
anyone seen Wes Craven's New Nightmare in the last 25 years?
But yeah, I mean, I thought the first one was a lot of fun, you know, as like a first timer, and the feeling that I got with these movies, kind of what you guys were alluding to a few minutes ago, was that they are Star Trek movies for people that haven't really watched Star Trek before, or like aren't necessarily Star Trek fans but want a more accessible piece of
It's a
Star
little
Trek.
less nerdy. It's a little more action.
Sure,
you know?
and like I think it also serves as a really good way for people to get into Star Trek because it's
And that's
it's
why
a
I
more
won't
quote
entirely
unquote
shit on it.
modern and updated
Right.
facelift to Star Trek.
Yeah.
And like I never had an inclination to watch the series. But after I watched these movies, I was like, I kind of want to go back and watch some of the older movies in the series
watch
now.
Rathacon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rathacon's really good.
Yeah, I actually started it like a year or two ago and then just got sidetracked.
Yeah, it's a submarine movie in space, which is it's so fucking fantastic.
Right
and
on.
I think Star Trek 09 lives on the fact that they get the character dynamics right, that like the crew itself works like the show does, and the actors are so game for it that like even though they're basically playing impersonations, except for Simon Pegg, who's like, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want as Scotty, and it's way
Which is
better.
funny
And
because
somehow it's
he
gonna
was
work.
my favorite in the whole
He was
movie.
so good as Scotty.
Yeah, he's so good. I just love that. I like this ship. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I loved him in the second one too.
Yeah, well, because what's
was
great
my
about
favorite.
Scotty in that one, he's like, oh, you got missiles? Bye. I'm going to go have my own plot line over here with blackjack and hookers.
Right. Yeah. Well, we kind of skipped ahead to Picard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, there's not much to talk about it yet, because currently about 45 minutes of it exists.
Right. Yeah. Discovery. Have we touched on that?
So I've seen a bit of it now. We watched the premiere when it came on.
I've only
and-
seen the first episode,
yet? Okay.
but it was very. My biggest problem with it was that there was like a comical amount of lens flare, and I know that that's like a goofy thing to say, but it was like
The Abrams
literally
effect.
Yeah.
comical how much lens flare there was, and I kept like laughing about that while there were very serious things happening.
Right.
But it was very sleek and it was very pretty, but I just didn't feel like super engaged by it, and I didn't want to pay for CBS All Access, so
Michelle Yeoh
only
shows
saw
up
the
and is
first one.
immediately killed off. And I'm like, well, then why am I going to watch this show?
Why even pay for that?
Yeah. And
I'll pay money to see Jean-Luc Picard do whatever, though.
Discovery goes to my least favorite thing about Star Trek immediately, and that's the mirror universe. I think the mirror universe is dumb and stupid and a
Tell
bad
us
plot
how you
device.
really
I'm
feel.
offended that you even brought it up.
So for the uninitiated, there's an episode of the original series called Mirror Mirror, where the transporter does a thing, and accidentally some of the crew is sent to a universe where everyone is evil, And you can tell that this because
They have goatees.
Because Spock has a
That old
goatee,
trope.
and they all carry knives, and they're all mean. And
And don't worry, we get more of it in Deep Space Nine.
yeah, and then they go back to it a lot in Deep Space Nine, and I
you
think
can tell that they're evil because they wear like eyeliner. Like,
Enterprise
their
has
hair
a
has
super
grease in
fuck.
it.
yeah.
Yeah, they're super goth.
Everyone looks like they're going to a Depeche Mode concert, and it's like it's. And so that happened. Yeah,
And Jake's mom is still alive in that universe. So.
yeah, that's great. They should have hired a different actress if they were going to do that.
It's true. She's not.
She's not great, but that's okay.
It's okay.
So Discovery jumps there in episode 3 of the entire series. And at that point, you have to give me a reason to care about these characters. I'm going to care about Anthony Rapp because he was in Adventures in Babysitting and he was Mark in Rent. Like, that's the reason why I care about Anthony Rapp. I currently don't care about him because of anything you gave me about his character.
Right.
What I will say is that we watched some of Short Treks, where now they have these things which are 15 minutes long, and they're just like, what if this happened? Things for
And what if-
in between. And the...
What H. Benjamin
Oh
was
my
there.
God, this is so H. John Benjamin
H. John, why do I
has
say
a episode called The Trouble with Edward, where he plays a disgruntled science officer on a ship in the original series era who accidentally invents the tribbles. That the tribbles are these self-replicating fluff balls which eat anything that's around them, and they're born pregnant, so they replicate at an incredibly fast rate. And he's created these as sort of a food source, and they were like, "Don't make these." He goes, "Oh, I'm gonna," and that's the entire plot of it. So
Wow.
it's like, what if Archer was on a Federation ship, and that's the entire 15 minutes. And it's brilliant.
Isn't Marvel doing a series soon called What If?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is based on the old comic books.
Okay.
What if the Hulk was intelligent? What if Jane had had Thor's hammer? Like that. They ran those
Right.
for a bunch of. When I was a kid,
Years and years. It used to be like an annual thing.
Yeah, I remember
Okay.
when I was a kid in like the 50-cent boxes at the local comic shop, you find a lot of what ifs and then what does, which were what ifs that were all stupid.
Okay.
They were all like, what if Howard the Duck had Iron Man's suit? And then they'd like come up with just stuff
To
like
be
that.
fair, a lot of the what ifs were pretty fucking
dumb
bad,
also,
too.
yeah. But they're dumb in that Twilight Zone way of the like.
Yeah, well, they're still kind of interesting.
Yeah,
Sometimes
and
there's a
like,
banger in there.
and then at the end you're like, whoa, and like I guessed it like 25 minutes ago. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lindsay and I, we actually did an episode not too long ago about where we kind of talked about phase, what is it, 4 that were
The Ant movie from the 70s.
no
No, but that's a good pull.
of the MCU.
Full of these.
And we just kind of threw around ideas on what to expect from the new phase.
Hopefully, no
the
more
MC.
3.5-hour movies where the cast signs their name on the screen at the end.
Sure.
No, they're just going to reboot Phase 1 and do the same thing they've been doing for 10 years and 23
can't do
movies. And
any
how
more
are you
homework.
not bored of these yet?
Yeah.
Just start giving it to weird directors. Like, give David Lynch a
Yes.
Loki movie or something.
I would,
That would bring me
definitely
back.
go see that.
I will say, though, the Shin-Chi movie is turning out to be very
I'm
interesting.
excited about that.
Because that's one of the characters that has never been, like, popular, I
No,
guess, in
well,
a way.
he was a 70s throw-off character.
Yeah, but they've also... The casting in that is really interesting.
Tony Leung
I
in
know!
his first English role. I am so stoked on
I want
this.
to be in because like he's been in so many of my favorite movies.
You're
of
a fan
all
of In the
time.
Mood for Love, right? Yeah.
Count it out. Count it out.
There's a love connection
David,
happening
you're
here.
off. You're off the podcast. It's a Mac and Ted show
Well,
now.
I was just slurped.
Yeah,
This is
so
degrading,
I'm excited
frankly.
for that. But I don't think I'm excited enough to give Disney money.
Well, I mean, you could think of it as like you're giving Regal Unlimited your money,
And then they'll disperse that however these... Welcome to
Right.
Regal. Da, 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 da.
or you could just like buy a ticket to another movie and then
you go.
Well,
and then
it's,
go see this.
What's that joke? Demi Adjebe said, I'm sad that movie pass is over. I wanted to give Black Panther $11 every time I want to use the good bathroom at the mall.
That's good.
what's going on with Movie Pass nowadays? Anyways, is it
Oh, they're
still a
fully-
thing?
fully
Totally
folded.
done.
Okay.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
that AMC has one and Regal has one.
Right,
it's
yeah. I was about to say, like,
had
if
a
there's
good
still,
run.
I mean, they were great.
The Wild
back-
West days of movie
Yeah,
pass.
we
were
had a
awesome.
blasty blast.
When
Yeah,
I was just going to see like a movie for a buck every month.
And we
it
were
was
like
incredible.
gaming like the Regal rewards, and we were eating all the free snacks,
Right.
and like it was the greatest.
I've got the Regal
The golden
Unlimited, and
age.
I like it a lot, but it's not. It's not bad, but like there's a lot of things about it that I dislike. Where it's like, oh, it's 50 cents to use the app to get a ticket,
Oh,
and then it's like if
they have tiers too, right?
Yeah, those are based on like cities though, so it's not like
I think Nashville only has one tier.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nashville's all tier 2 or like the middle tier, but like I think
know.
that again, I think that's mostly based on like population centers, which is going to be a function
Yeah.
of like the cost to run the theater.
New York
The
has
AMC
several ones.
one.
Yeah, that the AMC one I think is just straight like
Yeah.
across the board.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But I know New York has several theaters that aren't on
Yeah.
the Regal at all. Like you just have to pay full price at those theaters, which kind of a dick move.
We like the AMC one, and we still somehow get a lot of free food and stuff with that one too. So
Yeah, because the tickets still count.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it counts as like if you're purchasing them and if you're
Regal's is similar to that,
Yeah.
which is cool because like I've got all these. I have like a dumb amount of points now,
Yeah.
but I'm like I don't really like popcorn.
I gotta have my
so, like,
movie
I don't know what I'm gonna
nachos.
do.
Yeah, Regal really needs to get their shit together and add candy to that fucking like free concessions.
ours is just
list.
like reward cash money for whatever you want to buy up there.
Yeah, it's dollars.
That's cool.
They're like, here's a
AMC.
$5
Yeah.
reward, get whatever
which-
you want.
yeah.
works, yeah.
I'll
That's
stack like 3 of them,
Yes,
and I'm like, I
what
want
is
the
it?
nachos and a
Yesterday
drink,
when you were just like
M&Ms.
doing like the all right, this is the $3, this is the $3, this is the $3, and like like Bill just kept going down and down.
I'm like, I live one more. I swear.
1917 is gonna be baller. That was gonna be incredibly depressing.
Yeah, it's. We had an episode on that. I think it's a very staggering technical achievement that is ultimately kind of hollow. I don't know.
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah.
I liked those guys enough, but there
Yeah.
were a lot of times when I was saying like, okay, yeah, so now they're gonna do this part of the escort mission.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just
It's-
clenching my butthole the whole time.
I loved it.
I mean, I
I
liked it
really
a
did
lot.
love it, but it was funny to see where it fell on my best of
I felt
2019.
sweaty when we
It was
got out of
much
there,
farther
though.
down than I expected to be
stressed.
going in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
do,
Star Trek.
yeah. Do we have any
Star
final
Trek.
thoughts on Star Trek?
It's all like almost all of it is all on your favorite streaming platform of choice. I think it's on Netflix and
Yeah.
Hulu and Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was.
And,
When I went to go take my pick of the litter, I typed in Star Trek and all of it showed up.
It is
Yeah.
very accessible.
Yeah.
Which is great because you get like you can go in and there are a couple of episodes of the animated series that are still even worth watching.
Okay.
Larry Niven, who is a fantastic author from the 60s and 70s, he wrote an episode of the animated series, and they got a whole bunch of people back like that. There's a really interesting episode about Spock's backstory that's in there, but you can like pick and choose all the way down this line, so you don't have to watch everything. I think all
Right.
the movies are on Amazon Prime now, but they're not on any of the other services.
Okay.
I think Nemesis might be hanging out on Amazon for some fucking reason.
You don't need to watch
Yeah, it's like,
Nemesis.
did they forget? Yeah, it's-
Right.
Look,
Hopefully.
Star Trek Picard was even like, we forgot that Nemesis happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all you can pick and choose. You'll find your Trek. It's fun. I mean, it's. I think it's the only fandom I have where I've never been like fully out of love with it. Because there have been some where I'm just like, fucking, I don't want to deal with Star Wars anymore. Shut up about Star Wars, the entire world.
Right.
There's so many different versions of Star Trek. It reinvents itself all the time, but like, I don't know. Like I do feel like there is a Star Trek for everybody.
Yeah. It definitely has that feel from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, so I only have one last question to ask about Star Trek, and it kind of plays into what you've been saying about how there's like a Star Trek for everybody and how it's sort of reinvented itself over the last, 50 to 60 years. Yeah. Do you think that there is still a new and exciting series we could get out of Star Trek, or do you think that most of the best stories, the most engaging stories have already been told with it? Because it is, like I said, that 60-some-odd-year-old property.
I am truly optimistic, both for what I've seen of Picard so far, because I
Yeah.
think they're setting up mysteries that aren't the J.J. Abrams mystery box. They're like, here is a story we're going to tell. Here's the first chapter of it. Please come with us on this journey. And I said, yes, please. Thank you.
Sure.
And I think Lower Decks has such potential to be like genre battering Star Trek that they're eventually like, all right, we're finally making a comedy. Here's a Star Trek comedy. And I'm excited about that. I think that there are still stories to tell because there's an infinite universe and there's so many
Yeah.
races. Like, I want to hear more about the Bajorans. I'd like to see what Trill Society is
I don't
like
need
just
to hear
on
more
there.
about the Bajorans.
Okay, fair point. We kind of exhausted that well
We
enough.
need a Ferengi series.
I love the
Immediately.
Ferengi
Oh my
so
God.
much.
I would kind of love
so
a Ferengi
much.
series.
And
'cause it
when
would-
people tell me that they don't like the Ferengi, so they didn't watch Deep Space Nine, I tell them that they don't like the Ferengi because they didn't watch Deep Space Nine.
You know what a Ferengi TV series would be? Seinfeld.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm 100% on board.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I just kind of
See what
well
you did
played,
there.
sir. Well played. Yeah, I was kind of thinking like a Curb Your Enthusiasm sort of show with a Ferengi would be
Yeah.
Chef's Kiss.
It's run from the Ferengi
Yes,
Authority.
yes.
And
Yes.
like, going around closing businesses.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Combs.
I will always give Jeffrey Combs more work.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like with Picard, I'm just very happy that we're moving forward in the universe of Star Trek and we're in the future of the original timeline and we're moving forward and I'm really excited to see where they take it and where it goes and you know what we missed and what they're gonna fill in those gaps with, and I'm also very, very optimistic. I usually would say cautiously optimistic, but I'm just gonna go ahead and just be optimistic about it.
So you think the future is bright?
I do.
I actually have to wear shades. That's how bright it is.
All right.
I might end up getting CBS All Access. What I may do, if depending on how many episodes there are, if there's going to be a lot, I might do it sooner rather than later. If there's only going to be like 10 or 12, I
Yeah.
might wait until it all airs.
It's
not a
supposed to be
bad
10,
idea.
10 episodes this season and then
Okay.
like 12 next.
Okay, I might wait until they all air, and then that way I could just pay for maybe like 1
could do
month's
that
worth
sweet
of
free
CBS.
trial.
Yeah,
Bang them all out in a week.
that's what I'll probably do.
As we
Assuming
learned
that,
with Disney Plus, this is the way.
yes, right. I'm so glad that got renewed for a second season,
Yeah.
and it's coming back this
Yeah.
year.
It's that is I'm hanging all my Star Wars hopes on the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
It's been super fun so far.
Yeah,
Same
it's
as
a
Yoda.
space western.
Yeah,
That's great.
It's Il Mandalorio.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I like it.
Django, Django, will you ever love again?
On that note, I think that this is a good place to wrap up. So before we sign off real quick, I guess we need to do shit that doesn't suck first.
Yeah, so if you don't listen to the podcast, I don't blame you. We have a sequence that we do basically every episode called Shit That Doesn't Suck. It's basically our version of a recommendations. Something that you've been watching, reading, listening to, just something that you really enjoy that you've partaken in recently in terms of like anything really, a movie, a book, comic book, what have you. So whichever one of you would like to go first, if you have something, I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I got a thing.
I do not
You got a thing?
apologize. But
I
go
actually
ahead.
prepared them earlier today. I
Look at you.
texted both of
I've got a
them,
thing.
and I was like, "We do these segments. We're gonna do both segments, the quick hits at the beginning, but we decided that since this between when this episode is recorded and when it's released, those quick hits will no longer be relevant because they will be not new news; they will be old news. So yeah."
All right.
But shit that doesn't suck. Tiffany?
My favorite current shit that doesn't suck. I'm right now obsessed with British gardening TV shows, which is like a whole different kind of nerdy. But my favorite British gardener is Monty Don, and he has a show on Netflix, and it is called Big Dreams, Small Spaces. And it sounds real dumb, but one night, I don't know, the world's awful, and I was like, this looks fine. I'll watch this. It sounds nice. And it was so nice. And now I'm obsessed with gardening. And now I have like bought all of his books. And we got BritBox, a subscription to BritBox so that we could watch Gardener's World.
Okay.
And he's just like the calm little center of the universe.
It sounds very zen.
It's so zen, and it makes me so happy. And like he just like is so optimistic about everything. And he's just such a kind like person. Like he reminds me, like I feel like he could be like the Doctor in like Doctor Who. Like he's just like a cool, benevolent old dude who knows a lot of shit, and that's my new favorite thing.
Okay, right on. What's it called again?
The show on Netflix is called Big Dreams, Small Spaces.
Big Dreams, Small
And then
Spaces.
he also has some shows where he goes and visits gardens in other countries, but his name's Monty Don, and he goes to like gardens in France and gardens in Italy, and then he just did a new show that's American Gardens, And they've aired 2 episodes that I could only find on YouTube, and sometimes the audio drops out, but I don't care because it was worth it. And he like went around America, and then I was reading like the comments on like his social media, and all these like people in like Britain were like, "Oh,
Sorry.
America's so beautiful. I didn't know." Like, well, but they would say it with a British accent, but they're like, I didn't know America was so beautiful. And it was just really nice to like read people from other countries saying nice things about us for once.
Right.
There's a whole fucking song about America being beautiful. Get with it.
Everywhere around the world, they're coming to America.
But I think that it's because
That is
like,
exactly the song I was referring to also.
we have so many different climates here where there it's kind of just raining all the time. But like we just have, we have deserts, and we have like tropical areas, and we have, forests and stuff. So I think it's really interesting to like kind of see America from like somebody else's
fresh
view.
perspective.
And, yeah.
Right.
They've never seen a succulent before. I mean, that's crazy for them.
They have succulents in Britain.
Right. Mac, what's your shit that doesn't suck?
I'm gonna promote back. I believe we're going back to this. I'm gonna just say my appearance on Star Trek Tribunal, and I know Sean runs a fantastic podcast, and it was a lot of fun going very deep dive on a very specific part of Trek with him. Especially because we got to talk about sort of bits that I've never really gotten to talk about as a larger part of the Trek world, Trek lore, whatever. And each one of his episodes is at turns very insightful and incredibly hilarious because he's dealing only with the parts of Trek that are really absurd. And it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of love for it, and I was just really, really happy to be part of the show. So yeah, check out Star Trek Tribunal. The episode we worked on was called Shades of Grey, which is the Star Trek clip show. God knows how that happened.
Yeah. Definitely go check that out. We're all about the cross promotion here on the podcast, like
For sure.
helping each other out. So
The Nashville nerd community, it is tight knit.
yeah, we're
It sure
all
is.
about we're all about boosting each other up, and if we hear word about like competition, then we punch those fuckers in the throat
Yeah, I'll
and or
kneecap a
dick.
motherfucker. I don't care. I'll go back to prison. That shit ain't nothing to me.
I've got a bat left.
I'll go next. I just started reading the Batman Long Halloween series, and I am. It came from recommendation originally by Ted, and then by several other people, very, very promptly, and they were very adamant that I start here with my first.
Technically, I told you to start with year 1 and then move into the Long Halloween.
Year one
Did
is
you?
so good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Long Halloween is like a pseudo sequel to year 1. I told you, it was basically the first 2 years of Batman.
Okay.
As much as I like the Nolan Batman, I'm kind of sad we never got Darren Aronofsky's year 1.
I read the script, and dude, it's like mental. But at the same time, it's kind of like, yeah, I kind of want to see this this glorious disaster.
It would have been like the Marlon Wayne's Robin version of Batman Returns.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to get more into it. I mean, it's from what I've heard, it's hailed as one of the best Batman iterations.
It's awesome. I love everything about it. Just to totally co-opt your moment here. The artwork is great. It's just like it really works all together. I think, in my opinion, Loeb and Sale really hit on something special with that one.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm excited to get into it. Ted, what's your?
So, I probably have used this one before, but I'm going to again because I was at home the other night and I was like, what should I watch? And I went back and revisited Mandy.
Yeah, this has definitely been your shit that doesn't suck before.
Yeah.
So
But-
you're ready for Color Out of Space, right?
Right.
That's actually what prompted me to go back and rewatch Mandy. It was in protest because Color Out of Space is only playing here in one theater.
It's
the
playing at the
Belcourt.
Belcourt. Yeah.
It's 2 blocks from our house, so.
Yeah, that's cool. I like the Belcourt a lot, but it's just like I don't like driving all the way out there.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
And then, they have a parking lot that's like, what, 3 cars big, so you gotta park
Yeah,
all the
and
way
you
down
gotta park in the
yeah.
street. It's,
Yeah.
it's just this whole thing. Living in the city, right? But
Yeah.
so I went back and I rewatched Mandy, and I was just like, "Fuck, this movie is good." It's just basically, to me, it's basically like a really good distillation of like a midnight movie. Mm-hmm. Just done really, really well.
And it's on Shudder now.
Yeah,
so.
Shudder rules.
Shudder
Yeah,
is
like
fucking awesome.
That's one of the best $6 I have ever spent.
Yeah, do you still have it or did you? Okay. Yeah, I like, Ted and I joke about hey, we're gonna add it to the list. The whole like comedic thing, like, oh yeah, what's the recommendation? Yeah, okay, I'll add it to my list, and then you never fucking
Right.
watch it. Okay, it's like a meme at this point, and it became like a meme with me and Ted, where we're like, I'll add it to my list, and then we're kind of like, I'll probably never get around to it. Shudder started out as one of those where I subscribed to it so I could, because I think that was the only way I could watch Halloween in preparation for our Halloween watch along movie episode, and I told him about all the cool shit that was on there, like the original content, movies, otherwise, and
They've got Joe Bob. They've got I love horror noir so much. The documentary.
Yeah.
I thought
They've
that
got
was,
Yeah.
Velocipaster.
they had Velocipaster.
yeah,
They have
and-
real
Werewolf
thing.
Cop, you guys. Werewolf Cop.
yeah. No, Shudder. I might end up resubscribing to
They
that.
also have Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight.
Yeah, which is a baller movie. I
It's
love
it's
that film.
really it's both amazing and terrible in almost equal measure.
That's what all great horror movies are.
yeah.
Yeah.
And man, Billy Zane chewing scenery like it's a $2 steak is fucking
Between
just
him and Bill
great.
Sadler, you have like
Yeah.
the two great like hams of early
Yeah,
90s films.
it's. Actually, I'm gonna change it. That's my shit that doesn't suck. Is Demon Knight.
Nice.
It's a really fun movie.
I have a cousin who made Gallo films in Japan, in Italy in the 70s, and I've never seen any of his movies, and they're all up on Shudder
Oh, wow.
now. So I'm like, all right, I guess I got to mainline these.
Wow.
Shudder and really Amazon Prime has a huge
Oh, yeah.
selection
Yeah.
of 70s Italian schlock.
I got really back into Bruceploitation again, like all the like Bruce Lee, Bruce Lie, Bruce Lincoln Lie, and just watching all these. I'm like, these are terrible, terrible movies, but I have never been more entertained in my life.
I love kung fu films.
Oh, yeah.
Like from the really highbrow wuxia stuff like Hero and Shadow and the early John Woo stuff and like all that to like of course Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung, legendary, but even down to like the really, really just terrible fucking we saw the 5 Venoms once and we're just gonna do that movie and call it something else.
My dad's favorite film is Five Fingers of Death, and I'm still like, this is like third or fourth tier, the Shaw Brothers stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll still dig it. Whatever.
Yeah, there's of course like 36 Chamber is a huge classic,
Which is
film.
on Netflix now.
Yeah, the whole trilogy, well, pseudo trilogy, because like there's the first one and then the second one that's like the remake, but it's like a comedic remake, and it's
And then there's the Wu-Tang
awful.
album. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a classic. yeah, Return. But yeah,
Oh.
I'm gonna change my shit that doesn't suck again to Wuxia films.
Actually, wait, I got one. Shout Factory TV. I have that as one of my add-ons on Amazon Prime. Fucking fantastic. I think it's like $3 a month, and it's all the MST3K episodes, plus a whole bunch of old British TV. They have like The Saint and Space 1999 and like a bunch of stuff like that. And then the weirdest collection of like off-brand stuff you'd find at the back of the video store in the VHS days. They have Jackie Chan's The Protector in both the US and Hong Kong versions. They've got they've got the aforementioned Phase 4. They've got all the Smokey and the Bandit ripoffs, and it's just like this insane list of movies that I've always meant to see, and now I'm just like powering through these 80-minute nothings that were supposed to be lost to time, and they're all in these like 4th generation 35mm prints, and I am digging
Look
having
like shit,
this.
sound like shit,
Yeah.
are amazing.
Yeah. And Leslie Nielsen in Project Kill, or like Get Christy Love, or whatever. Like, these are fucking amazing movies, and we never make stuff like this because we only have room in multiplexes for like 6 movies a year, and they're all made by Disney. It's
Yeah, I'm pretty well known on the podcast and just to people who have spoken to me about film as like a pretentious dick about movies. But like there's something to be said about that like 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe into early 80s like schlock factor where it's just like, hey, we've got a bucket of fake blood, a dude who might have been in a high school play, and a woman who's willing to show her tits. Let's make a movie.
yeah.
You know,
Hey, it's how Herschel Gordon Lewis started. You know, it's
Yeah.
just you literally his
Classic
first movie
pull.
is called A Bucket of Blood.
Yeah.
And that's all that he had.
and then he did Feast of Blood.
Feast of Blood. God, he did a couple with Dick Miller that are fantastic.
Yeah.
I have a signed photo of Dick Miller up in my office. So that's the
awesome.
sort of thing. It's him and the guy who played Jason in part 2, but only at the point when he jumps through the window at the
Yeah.
end. Because it was 3 guys playing Jason in part 2. And like, so Warrington Gillette, I met him at a con years and years ago, and he decided, I'll kill your ass, Warrington. Love
Good
it.
point.
Yeah, it's
It's like a whole episode of things that don't suck.
yeah. We gotta spread the love because
like I
That
should
would be an
say another
interesting
thing.
episode.
Yeah.
Just
Say
do an
another
I feel like
episode.
we've pitched that before.
Have we?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
We should
throw
do it.
out, if everybody's doing a second thing, I'm gonna throw out my friend's podcast. It's called I Hope You Suffer, and I don't really watch horror movies, but they watch all the worst horror movies and then they talk about them and they have to suffer through them so that I don't have to. And it's one of my favorite podcasts to listen to right now because, like I said, I don't watch these movies, but I feel like I live vicariously through them.
That's
Right.
an awesome
And they
name.
watch.
Yeah,
a lot
I was
of
about to
things
say
on
that's like
Shudder.
the best like my
And they
my
do
podcast
suffer.
name is fucking
They do
garbage.
suffer.
they did Shark Exorcist, which was filmed here at the Opry. Or filmed
Well,
in Opry Mills.
part of it.
Part of it was filmed in Opry Mills, and I was like, "Well, we have to watch this now." I
And then we
guess.
did. I know. Sometimes I end up watching the movie after I listen to the podcast just because
Sure.
I'm like, this can't be this
Robo
insane.
Right.
Vampire.
Tiffany, do you want to plug your book? I know it's been out for a while, but
I mean, not even necessarily my book, but I make nail polish. It is like space and sci-fi themed. A lot of it is like nerdy stuff. It's called Comet Vomit. Mm-hmm. And you can go to cometvomit.com and you can find all my weird nail polishes there with names like Love and Alderon Places or Venus Flytrap. And I wrote a book about how to make nail polish. So if you don't want to buy my nail polish and you want to make your own, you can buy my book and learn how to make it yourself.
what's the name of your book?
It's called Hand Polished, A Beginner's Guide to Handmade Nail Polish.
Okay, and you can find it on Amazon.
On Amazon
correct?
or on my website.
Okay, is it a physical copy or digital only?
You can do either.
Okay,
Yep.
right on.
And if you
Awesome.
buy the physical book from my website, I make $6. And if you buy it from Amazon, I make like 50 cents or something.
So go buy the physical copy from our website.
Shop local.
Shop local.
Yes, shop local. What
and
is
then
it?
you can leave me a shitty
Support
review
artists.
Yes.
saying that the printing looks terrible, even though I didn't print it, Amazon did.
Yeah.
So that lady can go.
I had to go on a deep dive of the
Don't
person who
give
gave her
Jeff
a 1-star
Bezos
review.
any more of your money than you have to. So yeah, go buy it from our
Exactly.
website.
Buy it from a real person.
Right, Mac. Do you have anything that you want to plug?
I actually don't. I'm sort of between stuff right now.
Okay,
So,
right on.
we're on the podcast, and then 2020 is shaping up to be an exciting year. If you're at MTAC, apparently I'm doing 4 panels there, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage Loves Pachinko is returning.
Yes,
As
and I
is,
am fucking pumped.
No, my favorite thing I did, I loved that. I love doing that thing every year, but I debuted a new one last year, which I'm doing again this year, called America Give, which is about American influences in anime starting in the silent film era. So I go through and I explain sort of what Japanese silent film was like, and we go through and do a whole history. John Ford, Orson Welles,
Nice.
the heavy hitters, and I sort of go through. We did a whole look at My Darling Clementine and showed how the deep focus in that has sort of been a echo influence in anime for decades now.
We should do another anime episode about good anime.
It would be
I'm on
10
board.
minutes long.
Well, good is doing a lot of
Good,
heavy lifting
yeah,
here.
it's a pejorative.
But I'm thinking
Yeah.
something like Go-Go 13.
Yeah, which
and like
I found the NES game at McKay's a little bit
nice.
ago, and I'm
Nice
playing
score.
that again. God, that's difficult.
yeah. Those old NES games do not fuck around.
They do not
No.
fuck around.
People talk about like Bloodborne and Dark Souls. I'm like, you want to get your ass kicked? Find an original copy of Shinobi and then just like cry for the rest of your life.
Skate or die.
Yes.
Have you guys played Mario: The Lost Levels?
Yes.
It is fucking impossible.
I bought it for my Wii when I had. I was laid up in bed for a while when I got swine flu when that was a whole epidemic thing. So I was stuck in
Excellent.
bed for like 2 weeks. So I bought that and I made it to level like 1-2.
Oh yeah,
over
it's fucking
years of
impossible.
trying.
No, it's impossible. Like it was. I felt offended when I learned about the Lost Levels at first. Where they were like, it's too hard for American audiences, and I was like, I'll fucking show you. Picked it up and I tried to get through the first level for like 15 minutes, and I was like, yep, I get it now.
My favorite is the mushroom that murders you immediately.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And like my friend that handed me his Switch, he was like, "Here you go, like try it out, see what you think." And he just watched it happen. Apparently, that's a thing that all Mario people do is like they watch you just eat shit with
Suffer.
this fucking mushroom. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this episode.
Yes, 30 minutes after we said let's wrap it up the
I
first
know.
time.
No,
5-hour podcast.
We can have like an after hours special episode where it's just this part of us yammering.
Nah, it's
Shit.
it's definitely not the longest.
That's
episode.
going in.
It's pretty pretty.
And
up
now
there,
we bring
but-
ourselves to the 90s in wrestling.
God. Oh boy.
right.
All right. Well, yeah. Like I said, thank you, Mac and Tiffany, for coming on and helping me do this episode right. Like I said, I wanted to do the Star Trek episode correctly. I wanted to do it justice because it was our first episode on Star Trek, and I greatly appreciate you guys coming in. Ted, like always, I appreciate you being,
No one cares, David. Wrap it up.
demeaning and mean towards me 100% of the time, but I do appreciate your candor and your Star Trek knowledge because I don't have much of it. So
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us on.
thanks
a lot
for
of fun.
filling in the gap there. Appreciate that.
I was gonna say something mean, and
He
I
was
was like,
revving up.
it
I saw
seems
it.
Superfluous?
inappropriate. Yeah, superfluous is
Yes.
not really the word you would use there, but okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. We'll take this cue to sign off this bitch. Like always, be kind, stay geeky, eat lots of cheesecake, do all those fun things. Goodbye.
Bye.